Go live now. Okay, I think it's working. We are live.
Good morning.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good day, good night. Bye.
Hey, my name is John Selway. I'm an artist in residence for 343 Studio.
Who's
Mentorship
that?
sessions are one-on-one sessions with our artists in residence where you can ask any
What's going on?
Who's got ads on?
I think that was probably me. Sorry.
I'll stream the ad in the stream. That's.
I will be banned from this in the future.
That's fine. Don't worry. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Me and Philip Wear the Same Shirt. Welcome to Compress It Like an Idiot, the Patreon group special hangout Q&A live stream special. What is this show about? Well, we're just going to hang out and ask each other questions, take questions from whoever wants to throw some questions at us, or just do nothing if we get no questions and sit here in silence.
We'll just stare at each other.
Anyone got any questions? Phil, I know you had some questions. You had some questions for Gus.
I did.
Why don't you start it off?
Friendly sounds. So I was just listening to your Instagram stuff and then I checked you out on YouTube. And in one of your YouTube clips, it's like, you see your Eurorack case. Is it literally like an 84 HP 6U and that is doing all of that? Or is there more to it that happens off camera or in the computer? That's
no, that's it. It's all there, but just keep in mind that it's, two of the most powerful Eurorack modules on the market, being NerdSec and the ER301. I mean, the ER301 is only a couple steps down from having an old laptop, just with the amount of things it can do at one time. But that being said, yes, it is all just in that case 84 HP.
So is that doing the compression and everything, like, or does something happen after? It must.
The only thing, so I generally, anytime I use equipment, I run stereo out into Ableton. It's more simple for me, and honestly, the longer I do it, for whatever reason it seems like I get better results if I just go stereo. That way I do all the mixing in whatever box I'm using, and then I'm just going into Ableton. 90% of the time I have a drum bus in Ableton on the whole mix, just because drum bus makes everything sound better. And I've had people ask me, like, what outboard gear are you using? Drum bus. That's, maybe I'll put an EQ on it or something like that. But if I'm actually recording tracks, to release, if I multi-track, I'll go through and do a little bit of mixing and stuff like that. But more and more, I find I actually make things worse if I mix. It seems like it's better if I just leave it alone.
So what are the sound sources? So you have the two powerful sequencers. So what's actually playing the sounds?
The ER301 is playing sample chains. Assimilator, which is the other sampler in the case, that's on drum duties. So that's all just, kick, snare, hi-hats, toms, stuff like that. And then in the ER301, I have 4 samplers, generally speaking. Each one of those samplers is running a chain of 120 samples. So I have 10 octaves in the NerdSec. I have 120 samples on each sampler in the 301. That gives me basically, I can, say C# is this sample, and I always know it's that sample. So a big part of it is just having this huge library of sounds to pick from. And then I can just kind of go through and say, this one, and this one seem to go together, and just kind of loop that. And then that's when you start to sort of hear a rhythm. But it's really fun, because if you just kind of want to add a little break or a little bit of variation, I can basically just add a random note. And, because I'm working with glitch music generally, it doesn't really matter. I can set it up to do more musical stuff, but I generally don't want to get bored. So
sounds very impressive.
Thank you.
When you said the, pardon me if I get the name wrong, the 301, the ER301, one of the samplers, you said.
Yeah, so you can run basically as many samplers as the CPU and the RAM will allow.
Wow.
And I'm maxed out at, I could probably get it down to a couple more if I was a little bit more diligent with how I prepared the samples. But I have a particular way that I do it. It ends up being about 3.5 minutes per sample chain. If I have 5 of those, maybe I can get 6 actually. Then I'm out of RAM anyway. So, but if you were just using one shots, you could basically just keep dropping samplers in until, the CPU crashed.
And how much RAM is there on there?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know much about the 301. Whenever I think about getting one, there's a long waiting list.
Yeah.
How did you land on that?
512 megs.
Sorry.
512 megs. That's not much. That's like a PC from 1999.
And that's what I was saying. Like, it's basically that. It's an old laptop.
That's like less than an old Akai.
Yeah.
How funny.
And only 480 of that is usable for samples, it looks like.
A simulator is quite powerful as well, isn't it?
Extremely. Yeah. That's the superior sampler in my opinion, is the assimilator. It sounds better. It can, just completely mangle sounds to oblivion. And I've never heard anything, when you lower the pitch on something in a simulator, I think it sounds better than Ableton. I don't understand. I don't know enough about computers or coding or anything like that to know why that is. I assume it has something to do with the DACs inside of it. But it sounds incredible, and it's overkill for the system. Like I could easily do all the drums in the 301 and, just do it that way. But it's just something about the punch that they have coming out of that. It's so good. And it's that. Generally speaking, if people ask me about it, I usually actually try and push them towards the assimilator rather than the 301, because most of the time I think when people are thinking about picking up a 301, they're thinking of the sampling capabilities. Most of the time, certainly not all the time. They're so hard to get and they're so expensive and the whole thing is so weird. I usually say you can usually get an assimilator pretty quickly. Go with that. Because you can do a lot of the same things. Certainly not all of the same things, but.
And how do you mix all that together with external mixer?
With the 301.
Oh, okay. So 301 acts like as a bunch of things for you.
Yeah, definitely. Essentially, I have the 4 samplers. Each one of them has a trigger, CV for selecting the slice, and then the modulation basically sends whatever sampler I want to either the mimeophone or the herb verb. So I just have a VCA in there. If it positive voltage, it goes to I think herb verb. Negative, it goes to mimeophone. So the sound comes out of the 301 into one of those, then that is fed back into the 301 where it's mixed all together. From the 301, it goes into Morphogene. The whole mix generally dumps into Morphogene. That's constantly recording. So I can just, at any given time, I can just kind of glitch out the entire mix. And then from Morphogene into the WMD muscle, and then from muscle into Ableton. Yeah.
Okay, so some post production and also is there with the muscle doing some compression. How much compression are you doing?
Too much.
It's never too much. No such thing exists.
It's really weird. I still feel like I really don't entirely understand compression at like a very technical level. I understand what it does fundamentally, but people talk about getting rhythm and groove out of a compressor. I have no clue about that other than side chaining, stuff like that. I really am just somebody who kind of pulls stuff up or down until it sounds good. And to me, I just like over compressed sound usually.
Yeah, I second that. I like over compressed sound as well. I like in production. And muscle isn't really like the subtle model as well, right? So it also controlled with like one knob. You either compress or you don't. So
you have there's attack and release on it as well. But it's more for me, it's just kind of it really is a utilitarian compressor for me. It's just kind of lopping everything off. And because I'm going stereo out into Ableton, it's kind of nice to just say, okay, this is where everything is at, and then take it from there inside Ableton. Yeah.
Yeah, because I completely agree with Philip. It sounds really dense, and it sounds really sort of heavy in a good sense.
A lot of times, I've recently stopped, but I'll also run the mix through analog heat.
Oh yeah, we discussed this in some.
Yeah. Sometimes Baum as well, or Boom, or whatever you call it. I was actually
Baum, right?
Yep. And I was mixing some tracks yesterday, and I'm pretty sure Ableton sounds better. Rather, I think it ultimately everything sounds cleaner, punchier, and just more defined if you do everything inside of Ableton rather than these kind of more mid-priced external processing gear. Like they sound awesome for sound design and to really mangle stuff, but as far as kind of getting towards the end of things, mastering or kind of bus processing and things like that, I'm kind of losing more and more faith in, at least in those more mid-price boxes, just because I've really tried to get better about being essentially anything I do. And yeah, I think
what about the drum bus? What do you do much to it? Do you sit there and sort of tweak it a lot until you get it right? And also, do you do that? Do you record everything first and then do you drum bus it, or do you have it drum bussing while you are making the stuff so you just like can get the vibe?
That's exactly right. Generally speaking, anything that I think I'll probably do, I try to do on the front end rather than later on, which introduces its issues doing it that way as well.
Also, like, I mean, I some people don't like the idea, but like putting stuff on the master, I just have to do that to sort of get into a vibe somehow. I just have to chuck stuff there.
I'd actually like to ask the group a question here about just that thing. I think that's a really interesting topic. I'd say 80 or 90% of what's out there on mixing and mastering, it has nothing to do with us. It has to do with, studio projects, where a band is going in and actually recording and mixing and everything else like that. I feel like it's just a completely different set of rules on the electronic side. What do you guys think about that? Yeah, I don't even know if that's a fair question.
Yeah, I think, and also in those videos, they have, you have to think about what's going to sound like in someone's car or what's going to sound like in someone's tiny little radio. No one is going to listen to my music in a car. I don't think if anyone is going to listen to it, it's not going to be on a little radio. I don't think no one would ever broadcast it like that. So, yeah.
But I do think a lot of... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, but doing those things that they say in those videos that you shouldn't do, I feel sometimes a little bit guilty, and I know that I'm doing the wrong thing. But anyway, sorry, you go on.
I was just going to agree. I think a lot of the production tutorials you see out there as far as mixing, mastering are more for instrument-based music or like band-based music. From the electronic side, I think you've got a lot more freedom. Someone mentioned not putting stuff on the master track. I don't know. When I'm mixing down a track, I don't do that because I've been told not to. But if I'm making stuff to then use in a track, I'll throw all kinds of crazy shit on there. Just go wild.
Sorry, not to interrupt, but
no, yeah, go ahead.
That kind of illustrates something I think that we're driving at, is that, you know, you don't put stuff on the master because someone told you to, but like,
yeah,
I mean, but why? Like, I mean, I put shit on master all the time, you know, and it's people have told me not to, and I don't know, screw them, right? Like, what do they know?
Let's change the theme of this. This is going to be the electronic music confession booth. Everyone.
Well, I think we have someone here who can actually answer our questions about maybe why you don't want to put something on the mastering chain or the master chain before you hand it off to like a mastering engineer, and that would be Nick, who does mastering all the time.
Yeah, I'm actually the first time I'm hearing this. Like, I feel so. The problem with what you put on mastering on master chain, when you send it out to a mastering engineer, you may encounter some problems because he asks you to take stuff out of master bus, right? And it may sound completely differently. But on the other hand, you can send him your version and tell him, here's what I came up with. Like, can you do any better? And he can use his stuff to kind of build towards what you've been doing with maybe a little bit of different take on it. So I don't think you shouldn't put anything on master bus. Just kind of be thoughtful what you do with it, because you may have to kind of take it out. Other than that, I feel like you should just go to town with this. Like, whatever you like, just fuck it, just blow it up.
Fuck it, man. Just blow it up.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm cursing. Should I not? I probably shouldn't.
I don't care.
Okay.
Have you watched any of my videos?
I don't know. Who are you again?
Yeah. Where am I? So we do have some questions from the YouTube chat. First one comes from BM. How do you make sound? Vibrate sound waves. Airwaves, I'm sorry.
I get my mouth and I go like this.
Yeah. Yeah, just vibrate the air, make it go squiggly.
Next you joke, but your mouth is really one of the most powerful synthesizers, you know.
Look at Beardy, man.
If you're making music, like, there's no reason that you can't just, you know, make a noise and record it and put that shit into a sampler, and like, no one will fucking know, you know, if it sounds good, and people, you know, right? I mean, I'm sure people have recorded other bodily sounds. You know?
Totally. One of my label mates on Suck Puck Records, Prid Prod, I guess all his music is just Ableton stock drum sounds or other sounds, but the rest of it is all his voice, not even just like his singing or whatever. Most of the synth sounds and whatnot are him making weird noises, and then he just makes that into a loop over things. And it sounds like I would never known until someone told me that most of that is his voice. Okay. Another question from Johnny Payne. Beginner here, Mr. Ned Rush and other hosts. For DAW, sometimes user interface can make them very daunting. Do you have any advice for overcoming that hurdle, or just crank things to 100 and drive it real fast? That's kind of my thing. If it's daunting, just fuck around, especially when you are new to a DAW. Don't try and make a track with it. Just figure out what everything does. Don't worry about rules or anything. Just mess around. Any other opinions on that, gentlemen?
Well,
yeah,
I'm just trying to understand.
Click on shit.
I'm just trying to wonder what crank to 100, because I thought it, like, the UI is like too small, so crank it to 100, like 100 scale.
I think he just means go all out.
Just go all out.
Do whatever, you know. I think that's what he means by it. It is a bit confusing language.
Sorry. Would there be any DAW that would be? I'm just sort of thinking back to the different ones I've been using and the process of getting into them, because I don't know about you guys, but it was not as if anyone was sort of teaching me Ableton or going further back Reason or Cubase or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it is daunting to start with. I think you just have to keep at it, right?
Yeah.
I think with certain things like with Ableton, there's a certain sort of I don't know if this is the right word, but a certain kind of ecosystem or a certain sort of user interface logic that once you know it for one thing, it sort of applies to everything else. And I've not come across that with other things. Not that I've used that many. I've done a bit of stuff in Logic and a bit of stuff in Pro Tools, and like Pro Tools, when you use it very simply, is perfectly fine. But there's a hell of a lot of stuff there that's just like, how on earth do I find this? How do I turn the metronome on? Like things like that. And I think there's something about Ableton's very sort of vanilla interface that I think just makes it quite intuitive. So it's like if you sort of like if you select a bunch of clips and hold shift, if you click a clip and hold shift and then select another clip down the line, it selects all of them. That's just going to work across everything, across the entire like program or something.
But what if you don't, like, if you're literally a complete beginner and you just don't know? Because I suppose, like, when I started using Ableton and you too, that you knew what to look for, as in, like, you already knew what you wanted to achieve, and therefore you had to find a way to achieve it. But I just, like, what do you do when you're just absolutely... Where did you guys start? I started with trackers on the Amiga, like, and that was sort of pretty basic, I suppose. It was hardly anything you could do. So that was sort of quite a low threshold.
And very different. So it's like
and I think there's definitely a shock going from like Ableton to a tracker like Renoise or any of the, hardware, it's definitely a learning curve. But I think so for an absolute beginner, find a tutorial that's like a paint by numbers, make a track start to finish, and paint by numbers, follow along, mimic exactly, and then you have kind of a framework to work from, right? I think from I've used a DAW before and understand the principles of making music. I think exploration and Google and just clicking on shit is probably the quickest way that I learn.
And also lowest threshold in terms of price. If you're on a Mac, I've never used GarageBand, but it's something that you just have, and that, like, rather than forking out a lot of money, I think the Ableton, there is not a free version, but it's one that you usually get.
Yes.
You buy a little MIDI controller or something. Yeah. There's something to get you going.
The Light, Ableton Light, they call it, don't they?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's bundled usually with some hardware you can buy. But I remember myself distinctly looking at Ableton, like, not understanding anything about it. And I think it's a matter of finding something that makes it fun for you, because it kind of makes you go back and explore it further. And at some points, like for me, what was fun is to understanding like concepts behind things, like how compressors work, how like this piano roll works. And you can apply this knowledge further, like using other stuff and other software. So it sort of pays off. And I think what helps is remembering that it gets easier over time. Like once you know a little bit more, it becomes a little bit easier. Because whatever Ned's doing in Ableton, for me, like it's a masterclass in this thing, and you have to kind of get there before you can actually apply this to your stuff. At least how it feels for me.
I would add another important thing is to, when you're researching online, ask specific questions to YouTube rather than looking for Ableton 101 or Ableton beginner or whatever like that. Search how to make a drum beat on YouTube and see what comes up. Like, find whatever your particular goal is and look that up directly, rather than just starting with a general question like, how does Ableton work, or how does whatever DAW work? Try to ask the internet specific questions. At least for me, that's worked better with things.
Oh yeah, I think it's oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's a wonderful advice. Just go through them, like, from your goal rather than just like ask the gods of Ableton, like, what do I do next? So I feel it's a really great advice.
Yeah, Ableton was the first DAW ever used. It was my first time making music on a computer at all. I think it was Ableton 9 on a really almost broken laptop. And I tried doing things like how to use Ableton 101, and the videos weren't really helping. I was like, okay, what do I want to do? I want to figure out what this drum rack thing is. So I looked up how to use a drum rack, or then, showed you how to make a MIDI clip in a drum rack. Okay, I got that. How does sampler work? Okay. And I think the biggest thing too, if you're just starting out with a DAW, or, if this is your first time making music that way, focus on one thing, learn how to do that one thing, and then make a beat from there. Don't try and, when you're just starting out, learn how to make a beat, how to make an arrangement, how compressors work, what distortion does. Like, that's going to be way too much and you're going to get lost. Just focus on one thing. And especially if you're new to something, maybe if you're a little bit more experienced, this doesn't apply, but don't go straight in to try and make a track. Just try and make some cool things until you're comfortable, and then you can go and make the whole thing. I would think you're going to learn a lot more just making cool little things and then slowly building that to a song, rather than just diving in and trying to make a complete track.
Yeah, perhaps like how to make a track is too broad a question.
Yeah.
And too subjective. So yeah, be specific with your research. What is an EQ? Things like that. Okay. More questions, please, Damien.
All right. Next one from Jay. Ooh, that last name's going to be kind of hard. I'm sorry, brother. I'm just going to call you Jay. Can you describe, once you have a nice, crazy, glitchy sequence, how to turn it into a finished track?
Oh, that's a good one. Go ahead, boys. Like,
I would say to turn things off is the number one thing. So like, if you have a lot of things going on, just start turning them off for just a second here, a second there. That'll give you a lot in and of itself. But even just taking the entire mix down to just the drums or whatever percussive element, or maybe it's even just a drone or an atmosphere or something like that, that'll help guide you in another direction to go from there. But that I've found more and more that, at least with glitch, I get the best results if I turn things off and make the noise stop.
I think also, like, when you got a good glitchy loop groove going, just even if it's crap to start with, just make an arrangement up. There is some form of intro, there is an A or B section, a breakdown, maybe, you can come up with whatever you want, but just lay it out over time where there are different things happening at different times. And also, like you were saying, remove things, but keep some, and then when you make a new section, you have a different combination of things in there, so you don't turn everything off and then do something completely different for another section, literally just to get a bit of a structure going. Because I really used to struggle with that. I ended up with a loop and I couldn't get out of the loop, but it's literally just throw an arrangement down there in one way or another. It doesn't really matter to start with, but it's just a start, and then you can start structuring a track after that.
I'm a big fan of using reference tracks for that. Steal an arrangement. I don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? Go find my favorite track and steal the arrangement out of that, and then bam, now I already have an arrangement.
It's like an arrangement guide.
Yep.
Arrangement guide. So like take whatever idea you've got, make the arrangement, and then embellish that arrangement with fresher ideas. And if you want, put some music on it. If you've come up with like a sequence that's kind of got something about it that you enjoy listening to over and over, then it's time to move on to the next like layer or next idea or something, which for me is normally like a chord progression of some sort, and then a bass, and then, or sometimes none of it, and it's just all glitch.
Yeah, Jay, I'm not sure if your glitchiness is coming from something random, but something that I like to do when I've got a good sequence, but there's lots of random effects going on, is make multiple takes of that. Ableton 11's new take lanes makes that really handy. I'll grab maybe 8 different takes of the same thing, find which bits I like, or sometimes I'll do, if I've got a whole song with lots of glitchy stuff on it, do multiple takes of that, and then just take the bits I really like and make an arrangement out of there. Like if you get a really awesome snare roll or a really good glitch that you want more than once, you can kind of build your arrangement from there. Taking multiple takes is a really good idea. Any other comments on that question, gentlemen?
I love take lanes for like checkerboarding sounds. If you've got, whatever, take with a bunch of different crazy effects or whatever, you can just slice in little pieces of that too. It's just so, take lanes are amazing.
Yeah, I like the take lanes thing. You can actually, I haven't tried it yet, but I've seen other people do it. You can kind of like just bring in loads of loops, just like loads of stuff from the browser and drop it into loads of take lanes, and then just kind of go through and randomly stitch like random bits of that together and make a like loop that way. I haven't done it yet, but like I've seen people do it, and I think, oh, that's interesting. Oh, Alan's in the chat. Hi, Alan.
Yeah, Alan's in the chat, but not in the chat. What's going on?
No, he's watching. He's listening very closely.
He's watching you.
Okay. Yeah, next question.
All right. Let's see. Anyone know of, and hopefully use, non-Max for Live plugins that connect parameters across channels? Well, I got to tell you right now, Custom Random 24, now that Ned Rush is employed by Cycling 74, we are always going to be pitching.
I'm not employed. Not employed.
Oh, you're a certified trainer? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, since he's...
I have their stamp of approval.
Yeah. Now that he's affiliated with Cycling 74 in some way, we are always going to be pitching Max and Max for Live devices on here. But as far as
expression control.
Yes. That just came out. If you've got Live 11, I think expression control is the way to go. As far as third party, does anyone know of anything like that?
Isn't that a Max device though? I think
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, back in the day, there were things like Bohm's MIDI loopback, where it was like it was like a software MIDI controller environment where you could take a single control from anything, but then you could kind of map it to multiple things in a piece of software. So I think before Max for Live came along and all the sort of API stuff you can do with Max for Live, it was quite a popular choice to sort of tell, you could like tell a MIDI CC note to like move, to press left on the arrow key or something like that. And also I think maybe like kind of link it to multiple things. It's probably quite old now. This is going back maybe 15 years or something.
I still use it.
Well, there you go. There's got to be things out there.
But if you just have okay, I'm just thinking out loud now. If you have a MIDI controller with some sliders or something on, and you map them to a hell of a lot of things, could you then send CC data to that? Or is that what we were just saying? That you just do that, and that would be a way of, you need a piece of hardware or something. Or maybe you can create, on Mac, you can create sort of fake MIDI devices, can't you?
Yeah, so on Windows you'd need the loopback to do kind of the fake MIDI devices basically, but I mean even within Ableton you can route MIDI to multiple channels. If you just set like the input and then turn the monitoring to in, now you've got a MIDI signal coming in from wherever, and then put that through an arpeggiator or all the various different MIDI effects, and you can essentially have one kind of source MIDI channel that is now feeding multiple different, whatever that is, and then one button is now being propagated to 10 different MIDI channels that have various different MIDI effects and produce chaos.
Yeah. Custom Random commented, "Oh, I didn't know expression control was across channels." Yeah, I'm pretty sure with expression control you can select anything in Ableton. So you could even change tempo, time signature, all sorts of crazy different things. Use
CV
expression
tools.
control. Oh yeah.
CV tools as well. CV tools are awesome, even if you're not doing anything with CV. Especially like the CV utility, there's a knob you can just turn, and its output is then basically, whatever 0 to 100%, right? And there's 3 knobs, right? So you can turn that manually, right? Automate that, or assign an LFO to it, and because there's multiple knobs, you can now like some various different LFOs together, and again, you can send that across channels. The LFO tool, both the MIDI LFO and the audio LFO. It's an audio LFO. It's not really, but those can be done on multiple channels. So, but those are all going to be like Max devices.
You think you might be
Max for live.
You can.
Yeah, just get Max for Live once again. Cycling back, cycling 74 back.
There are so for example, the Octatrack, which is an expensive solution to this question, but that has like MIDI LFOs and MIDI, like it's got a MIDI arpeggiator which can send out MIDI note data or CCs, and it's got, how many has it got, Gus? It's got 3 MIDI LFOs per track, and there's 8 MIDI.
It's only
tracks.
10 times the price of Max for Live, but hey.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, so
you don't want to buy live. You could buy this $1,500 machine. It would work as well.
Expensive, yeah. But I think what I was getting at is that, like, you basically, anything that can receive MIDI can probably receive MIDI from anything that can transmit it, whether it's hardware or software. So, there might be some standalone applications out there.
What about VCV rack? Would that work?
I don't know if it. So what? Convert digital signal LFOs to a MIDI LFO and send it out as a MIDI CC.
I'm really curious about that. I think that would work.
And just use that as a crazy modulation tool, yeah. And VCV rack's free.
Oh, yeah.
No, because VCV rack, the regular VCV rack is free. VCV rack to get into Ableton, that's not. I think it's only like $20, but only like $20. But I think you have to pay to get it into Ableton.
But do you?
I mean, you can still send audio and MIDI between the two if you don't want to use the.
It should be able to transmit MIDI, but basically, what you would need to do is find a way to. If the software can't do it, then you would need some sort of extension in between to kind of, you basically create a virtual MIDI controller.
That's where loopback comes in. You could use loopback to send MIDI between VCV rack and Ableton.
I think you can do it on Mac using the audio MIDI setup.
You can, yeah.
And then you would route whatever to that, and then that appears as a MIDI controller in Ableton. So, or you could just use Max for Live.
Yeah, and to wrap that one up, custom random, what did John mention? CV Tools. Yeah, CV Tools is one of the free packs you get with Ableton Suite. If you do have Suite, go to your packs and make sure you download that. A lot of those packs are very cool. I'd recommend digging into them. Okay, next question is from Bob Bell. How important are separate outs?
Hi, Bob. Sorry, Bob did the thumbnail artwork
for
this show.
Oh, cool.
Say hi to Bob, everyone.
Hello.
Hi to Bob, everyone.
Hi to Bob.
All right. How important are separate outs on a drum machine? Seems a ball ache. I almost said balosh. I'm going to say balosh. Sometimes sending
Seems like a balosh.
Seems like a balosh. Sending it to Ableton. So end up using stock Ableton or VST drum machines, but get a really good vibe on the machine. Then nags me it won't hit as hard as if it were all mixed separately. How important are separate outs on a drum machine? Well, that's why I bought the RD8, was for the separate outs. As far as recording it, I kind of always record it all in one. The only time I use the separate outs personally is if I'm doing some sort of parallel processing thing where I've got the kick going into a chain that makes a bass, and then like the rim shot going into like a bunch of crazy delays and resonators and whatnot. I feel like I don't know, with the machines that just have a single out, you can kind of do your mixing on that machine and then just send it through drum bus on something to make it nasty. If you really want to pick apart something, get the independent outs. But I mean, like I said, that's why I got the RDA, and I haven't used the independent outs nearly as much as I thought I would. Any other opinions on that,
I feel the same way about the TR8S. Although, to be honest, I feel like I end up doing so much processing on it that I tend to just work in the box anyway, and it doesn't get used nearly as much as I'd like.
I think some of it also depends on what your gear set is. So if you have a lot of external effects or other boxes you want to send things through, then it's really important to have the separate outs, because you want to put this particular delay pedal that you have on the snare, and you want to put, the kick through this compressor, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't have the equipment to, you know what I mean? Like, I think that plays a part in it, is what's surrounding you in your studio that would merit the separate outs.
Generally, it's not a deal breaker. If you can't be bothered, you can do something amazing with just a stereo or even a mono in. You can still do cool stuff.
I would say maybe it kind of also depends on the drum machine. So like I think I've just got an analog rhythm, and all the you can get separate outputs, and I think, and it, like having all of that, if you've got a big mixer, if you've got a 24 or even just a 16 channel mixer, and you're routing everything into its own channel, and you're playing live and you're jamming with the drum machine, you've got so much like flexibility to just screw around with one pattern, like muting things, bringing things in and out that maybe the hardware doesn't make very readily accessible. And I don't think that the rhythm doesn't really, it's got that scenes thing where you can kind of, you could have a scene where like maybe just the hi-hat is soloed or something like that. But, like when I'm if I'm doing that kind of show, I might just like to sort of suddenly solo something or mute the bass for like a bar, just to add a little bit of variation in a pretty like standard pattern. If that's what you want to do, I think that would be like really good. I could see lots of advantages of having separate outs on a drum machine, if you've got a big enough mixer. If you haven't, then what's the point? Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta have the respective inputs.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I think also like maybe in certain cases, like you might get into a situation like this is sort of one of the difficult things about doing a show where you're just giving a stereo out to the front of house, is that they don't have much control over what they can do, and maybe you don't either. So if you get there and suddenly like your kick drum is so incredibly loud, or like the mid range is just too high, like what can you do if you're going into separate channels on a mixer, or if you're or I don't know, or you're routing out of separate channels of an audio interface or something? Like something can be done to address that like very quickly and discreetly, whereas like with a stereo mix, that's quite tricky, unless you're playing like a kind of nicely mixed track, stereo track or something. But if you're doing a live set and it's like, oh my god, like I've just thrown everything into a massive dub echo, and now the mid-range is screaming and everyone's covering their ears, like you're in trouble. Whereas with a big mixer, you can just go, oh, you can turn it off, and then the rest of the track is still going. So, but that's a very lavish and expensive setup and a lot to take around. So I guess it's down to how much you're willing to handle the balosh of doing that.
Hey, he didn't put a space in Bollock, okay? I like the word balosh too. It's fun to say.
It's one word, but now I'm going to start using balosh.
Balosh.
Or balash.
Ball ache.
Ball ache. Balosh. Okay. Next question, Damien.
Yeah. I think this was just a comment from Bob. Stop making me buy a rhythm. Thinking of playing live with a TR8 in Ableton, but worries me it will sound like mush. You know, I don't be super worried about that, Bob. I've been using like my RD8 and TD3 just into Ableton and then through my mixer to front of house at some gigs. And like these haven't been clubs with like big speakers. It's just been like a kind of shitty PA. And it sounded pretty good. A little bit better than coming through my monitors. So I wouldn't be super worried about it. If the mix is sounding good through your monitors, it's probably going to sound good coming through the club system. Don't be too worried about that. Also, what about from a mastering perspective? So the drums are all one stereo out with everything on top. Well,
Nick.
Yeah.
All mastering, all questions with the word mastering, it get
Oh,
automatically
mastering
directed.
is just, you have stem mastering, of course, when you have separate like 4 or 5 stereo tracks where you have a bit more control over how it mixed together. But I don't usually process them separately. It's more of a question like balancing. Otherwise, it's just going to be a 2-track, which you don't have much control over balance. So you just have to master it how it is. I have no problem with that. I previously mixed like instrumental tracks and vocals on top. Sometimes it's up like something like this. I feel it's fine. Like yeah, I feel it's fine. Like go, if you can only record like a 2-track of drums and then put a lot of separate instruments on top, or even just a couple of instruments, it's going to be fine. It's a lot better if you have like a shitty mix altogether.
All right. Shall we move on to another question?
Yeah, none in the chat, but I do have one for the group. Is there a piece of gear that you've bought that you've regretted or just ended up hating?
All of them.
I'll start. I got the Korg Volca new bass when it first came out. And I don't think it's like a bad piece of gear or anything. It's just not what I wanted at all. I kind of bought into the hype of like, oh, it's the new thing. It's going to be a tube bass and whatnot. And I just ended up never, ever using it. Like I could make some cool sounds with it, but I guess it's not what I wanted. You guys?
Well, I've got one because I was chatting with a friend recently about monitors, and I think I don't like my monitors, and I actually wish I bought the ones that I thought I wanted to buy in the shop, but bought these ones instead. Because
which one have you bought?
I've got Focal Alpha 80s.
And what's the problem with them?
The problem is that they have this slightly jarring automatic standby thing where if they don't have any signal for a certain period of time, they sort of go into standby. And the only way that you can disable that standby is to blast them with a load of signal. And because they're so incredibly loud, sometimes that means turning the volume up really high in order to disable that, which means that you, for a very split second, you have an incredibly loud amount of noise and you have to turn it back down. And I just find it frightening. And I wish I'd got Adams with the switch and the volume on the front. But otherwise, I think they're brilliant speakers. I mean,
I've
they
got
do
a pair
sound
of
good.
small Adams to sell.
What size?
The 3AX, or what are they called? A3X.
A3X. When I was in the shop, the two that I really, really liked were the Focal Alpha 80s and the Adam 5 A5s. But I went with these because I got a discount.
Interesting, because I personally hate Adam's sound, and I didn't like it at all. But I have a piece of gear I hate. It's a drum brute, the first one. It's like I despise this piece of shit gear. Like I probably would love to just smash it or throw it out of the window just because it's so shitty. But it has some redeeming qualities, like a sequencer, because I used it to trigger samples from my electronic drum computer I had. But other than that, it's like a complete dog shit of a gear.
What is the sort of everyone's opinion on sort of Arturia as an analog synthesizer company? Because they make like pretty decent stuff. I had like a Micro Brute or something for a while, and like it was a pretty decent, compact, versatile thing. But
I love my Mini Brute, but I never use it for anything. Like I waste hours screwing around on the thing, and then it's kind of never quite what I'm looking for, and so I go and go work in the box, go use operator.
I have a weird thing with Arturia stuff, especially like the Drum Brute or the what is it, the Matrix synth,
the Matrix
that
monster.
yeah, that real
Polymate
big
also,
one.
yeah. Polybrute.
Nothing. I don't have any issue with like the way they sound or anything like that. It's a very nitpicky thing that I have an issue with, which is they look at first like really, really premium quality pieces of gear. But then if you are standing right in front of them and you have a sub 37 on one side and you have the Matrix Brute on the other, you can almost see the difference in quality between the two, and you can certainly feel it in between the two. But the way they design their gear, it kind of looks like, oh, this is going to be very high, and then it's not, which I feel bad for even saying it, but it's just, that's my opinion on Arturia gear.
You just have to like curb your expectations a little bit, I guess.
I think mine, I have already sold it because it was one of those things, you watch loads of videos and you see people doing really interesting stuff with them. And this was the Polyend Dreadbox Medusa. And I loved the idea of it, but I could never I spent lots of time with it and I really wanted to like it, but I just couldn't make it. I just couldn't make it sound good for me. It was too much hard work to get to somewhere where I would enjoy it. So it had to go.
My piece of gear would be the Dirty Wave Mate. It's so powerful. You can do anything with it. It's really great, blah, blah, blah. The main reason I wanted it is because it's a handheld piece of hardware you can take anywhere and kind of make music on the go. And I think that's like, that's the problem with it by itself, is this idea that you can kind of have something and make music on the go anywhere. I can't do it. I have to be in the space to make music. Like, to have something on the go just never really, I don't know, it doesn't work. I can't get into it. So yeah, I would say for me it's the Mate.
I have a sort of reverse version of this question. Has anyone bought a piece of equipment and then sold it and then regretted it?
ER101, the orthogonal devices sequencer. I regret selling that.
Is that like the partner to the 301?
Yeah.
Are they like in the same family?
They're made by the same company, obviously, and they do play well together. But they're not, I wouldn't, like, it's not like you have one, you have to have the other or anything like that. The 101, I think it's based on a Buchla sequencer. But that's what it is for me. That's what I regret.
Anyone else?
I had a Seal Opera 6 polyphonic synthesizer, which I bought from a window cleaner. And Ned, I think you're probably looking it up because you haven't heard of it before. And it's one of those, like, they've not been around much. It sounds like, well, someone was comparing it to a super cheap Juno 106 or something, but it had a very unique sound. And I think I would want it now. I don't think I'm going to go out of my way and spending huge amount of money buying one, but I bought it for something like £80 or something. I bought it for hardly anything. I think it's got digitally controlled oscillators and analog filter. It's polyphonic synthesizer. Bought it super cheap, and then I think I would have kept it now.
Did we talk about this when we did our chat, or was that something else? That was
no,
another thing.
No, we have not talked about that one.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was just looking. I've just posted the link in the YouTube chat if anyone's interested.
I'm just trying to the Opera 6.
People watching, tell us what gear you hate or wish you didn't sell. Chime in.
I'm trying to think if there's anything I've sold that I regret selling.
I regret not buying something, which was an Oscar synth, which was really cheap.
Probably a lot of those. Like, regretting seeing them. Yeah.
I slightly regret selling my TR-707. Even though it was incredibly limited, it was just so much fun to play around with. But
did you sell it?
I did actually end up selling it for more than I bought it for. So it was sort of a shrewd investment. But it was just so fun, really. Especially that shitty cowbell. I don't know. Anyone else regret selling anything? No.
Okay.
I don't think I ever sold a single piece of gear because I'm so afraid I'm gonna just regret it.
Just stack
I think
just
it's
pile it
terrible. Oh yeah. I have a whole room of shit out there.
You were just talking about smashing the drum brute.
Yeah, but I haven't. That's the reason.
Because as soon as he does, he'll figure out how to use it.
Yeah, probably. Like, oh, that's what these knobs were for. Damn it.
Jolt awake late at night, Oh.
Someone's asked favorite granular synths techniques. I can talk about that.
I've got one I gotta recommend though. It's called Kraken Multi-Sampler. It is a Max for Live device. Sorry, custom random, but you're on the Ned Rush channel. That's what we're going to talk about every day. Kraken Multi-Sampler is really cool. I think you can get it for free or donate off of their Gumroad. Ned made something similar a while ago, which is free on Patreon, that kind of played a sample back like this, but this is a really refined thing. And I can't describe what it does too much because I don't know a lot of these terms, but Kraken, it's called a Kraken multi-sampler or just Kraken. It's really cool. Other than that, I like to use Granulator 2, just the Max for Live device that comes with Ableton Suite. Can do some really cool things. I know Ned could probably talk more about granular synthesis than I can.
Well, the first one that really blew my mind was Granulab on Windows, which had the worst interface ever, but was just such the best thing ever. I would literally just do gigs with it. I would open 2 instances of it and play one track and then slow it down to complete mush, whilst the other one was already slowed down to complete mush, and then bring the other one back up to speed. And I've never seen anything like it since. There is a new one which has been in like beta testing for about 10 years, which is now a VST, which I did a video about. I don't like the UI as much, but it's pretty much got the same sort of sound and engine. I quite like the one that's in Reason. I forget what it's called. I think it might just be called, I can't remember what it's called. It's pretty good. And then you've got all the sort of routing possibilities. But otherwise, I'm a bit out of the loop. I just like using Sampler, really.
Granular was the same for me as well. It was an excellent way of just destroying your computer.
Yeah, amazing thing. Like you could just, and also you could just load like humongous tracks into it and just bring them down to just complete snow, just absolute mush. And they had this really like inertia setting where you could time how long it takes to go from one tweak to another. So you could just quickly like click a parameter and move it, but then it will take like 10 seconds to move from that setting to the next. And you could just get all this wild stuff. And it was free, but it was Windows only for a long time.
I know you can do it, and I've seen it done on Macs, but have you seen any really excellent granular patches? done with Max?
There's one in the help file.
Kraken multi-sampler.
There's the phase vocoder in the help file, which will do like really good, really solid granular stuff. I guess it sort of really depends on how much control you want. And the thing is with granular synthesis is that there's a huge amount of stuff to explore that it's just difficult to sort of pack into a sort of UI that makes it inviting, I think.
I think Output Portal does a pretty good job. I mean, they have some, modulation controls built in, and I don't know, it's a little expensive, but it's
extremely friendly UI.
Yeah. I mean, there's literally just like an XY pad that you can drag around, and it, makes pretty designs, and
What's the name of it?
Portal by Output.
There's a hardware one that I saw at a synthesizer convention. It's the only synthesizer convention I've been to. I think it's called the GR1, and it just had like it was just. I'm just trying to Google it now just to make sure I've got the Sorry, give me a second. I'll see if I can bring it up here. By Tasty Chips. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to post it in the chat, in the YouTube chat. It's got like this massive screen. And like everything's pretty much ready available. I don't know if it's a touch screen or something. I did have a little go on it at this thing I was at. I can't imagine how much it costs, and in fact, the website says there's only 2 in stock. So if you want to buy one now. But I thought for hardware, this looked really, really, really nice. What's the one that Waldorf do? Is it the Iridium or something?
It's so expensive, I haven't even looked at it.
The Waldorf Iridium, that can do like granular stuff. This is all hardware, but yeah, and also quite expensive. But yeah, I think you can do perfectly fine with sampler in Ableton. If I'm honest, you can do the same stuff.
Yeah.
There's also, if you in Ableton, there's the what is it, Duncan? The texture time stretch.
Oh,
yeah.
The texture time. Yeah.
That I think there's really, really cool effects in that.
And you can automate that with clip automation as well, and get some pretty decent stuff. Yeah, I think it really kind of depends on what you want from a granular synth. Like, I think a fairly decent amount of polyphony. Because if you do kind of like monophonic granular stuff, it just sort of sounds like a computer kind of glitching out. But if you've got like a large amount of polyphony, then you can really start to get, clouds by Mutable Instruments. It's pretty good. Again, it's hardware.
Best reverb ever.
Again,
Yeah, why? What is it about that reverb?
I don't know.
It's in VC Re-Rack as well, isn't it? There's a port of it in VC Re-Rack. So
Yeah, but it sounds terrible, isn't it? Like as a reverb.
It starts like if you take the stock reverb from Ableton and just turn off all the sort of EQing and I can't remember what the other things are, then it starts like, it sounds, but I like it. I don't know what it is. It's satisfying. It doesn't sound real, but I like it.
And also, Nick, I feel like I remember from past conversations, you're very, very picky about reverb, aren't you?
Yeah, it's probably my bias somehow.
There is someone has made ported it to Max for Live, I think, Clouds as well, that you can download for free. I can't remember what it's called.
There's been a handful of those. There's now some Max externals that someone's ported all the source code from all the Mutable Instruments range into Max objects, which is nice. But yeah, like it's a good question. I think, yeah, like I say, I guess it really depends on kind of what you want from a granular synth. Yeah,
a lot of like synths actually, or rather samplers include like granular stuff. Like for example, this Polyend tracker, you can use it in a granular mode as well, and sounds fine. But yeah, I guess like just a sample synth.
Yeah, you can actually do quite a lot. You can get a lot of granular textures by simply using any sampler and re-triggering a sample really, really, really fast and just moving the start position and playing around with the amplitude envelope. And again, if you use a lot of polyphony and if you have a sampler where the envelope doesn't get re-triggered with each new note and instead gets allocated to each new voice, then you can get some pretty interesting stuff. So basically what I'm saying is that any sampler that has control over the start position can do really decent granular stuff if you blast it with like an insane amount of MIDI notes, like 5 times 128 on the grid or something, and just drawing up, you know, in MIDI, and start screwing around with those parameters. You can get pretty decent results as well. So yeah, it's a slightly longer way to do it, but pretty much for me personally, it gives you the same sound, I think. Okay, should we move on, Damien?
Yeah, so Bob Bell brought up, I'm half tempted to sell most of my gear, but A, can't, or B, think I'd regret it. Think I'm just going to pack it away in the cupboard and use it a bit at a time. Reassure me that this is the best way to go. I do have a question from that. How much hardware, and this is going to be something personal to every person, but how much hardware do you think you need to make the best music? Personally, if I could get like a MIDI version of a 303 style sequencer, and then like a MIDI version of like an 808 style sequencer, I'd pretty much just make music with a computer. I wouldn't use any hardware anymore. It's expensive. It takes up room, makes heat during the summer. I do love like, you know, like playing on a keyboard or like the tactile interface. But if I had my favorite tactile interfaces for my computer, I would never use hardware. Probably wouldn't buy anything ever again. What do you guys feel? How much hardware do you need to make music the way you do?
None.
Pushing a keyboard.
Yeah.
The mouse. And a chair.
I mean,
Yes, I think there is a difference there. I mean, it's a luxury to have hardware in a way, but I quite often just sit and noodle around in Ableton with the stock stuff. But I also feel like if I'm using the modular synth, I think I end up in a completely different place, which I wouldn't end up in if I started in Ableton, even though I could maybe sit there and reverse engineer it. So I think it just helps me end up at a different end point. But if I just had to keep one thing, I would keep the computer in Ableton. You know, that would be it.
Ableton is a modular synth, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is a modular synth in its own right.
It is.
What was the original question from the chat, though?
He is half tempted to get rid of his gear, but doesn't want to and thinks he regret it. He thinks he's going to pack it all away and just use a little bit at a time.
I think that sounds sound. If he doesn't need the money and the space, yeah.
Yeah, don't get rid of it. Just
you can always
use
sell
a
it
little bit at a
later.
time. Yeah.
And then you might regret it, and then you can come back and answer the question we asked earlier, which was, have you sold anything?
Yeah, don't do will it blend videos with all your gear.
Is that still a thing?
I don't know. But maybe
that's classic YouTube.
You can always sell it later, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm just going to be the devil's advocate with this. I do think there is something about actually having that, you know, really nailed down separation from the gear with selling it. Like once it's gone, it's gone. If you put it in a closet and then you sit down with whatever you're planning on doing, whether it be Ableton or, you know, whatever it is, and things aren't going well in Ableton, it may be like kind of like a fallback. Well, let me pull this piece of gear out. Let me pull that piece of gear out. And then you kind of slowly end up being exactly where you started. Whereas if you sell it and you literally don't have it, it's a bigger step. Now you have to say, okay, I need this thing so badly, I'm going to rebuy it, or whatever that may be. So there is something to be said about that, about depending on your personality. I'm kind of like that. If I don't really have that sort of, just put it away in a closet and don't use it. I'm going to use it. Like at some point, I'm going to pull it back out. I have to have it basically out of my life completely. I think it just kind of depends on your personality to some extent. I don't think there's anything wrong with either one. I don't really get into the whole, don't sell by, like it's all just stuff and it doesn't matter.
I'm a bit like that with guitars. I've never sold any of my guitars, and they pretty much just live in their cases. But every once in a while I get one out and I'm like, oh, thank God I've still got this. But there's the only, before I sort of became a bit more hardware-y, I would buy things and then sort of get bored with them and get rid of them because it's just like, well, this is just a toy, really. Now I'm sort of less inclined, and I really only sell things if they're not getting used or they're kind of obsolete. Like pretty much most of my stuff isn't getting used, but I know it's going to get used at some point because I go through these phases. I go through these phases where I'm just like, I don't want to make music at all. I only want to make music on a computer. I'm sick of computers. I just want to turn stuff on and, make noises and, stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't know if that really aids the conversation, but I've never sold any of my guitars. They're like my babies.
In summary, be a hoarder. Everything you ever purchase in your life, never get rid of it. You might want it later.
Just imagine if all I'd said, like, just burn it, like, just destroy it, physically destroy it, and we would be to blame. No, hold on to your gear.
Don't set fire to stuff.
Yeah,
it might be getting a little bit too personal, but also usually I feel like when you're going through those phases of I am just going to sell everything, or I'm just going to put everything away in a closet, or whatever. Usually the issue doesn't have anything to do with the gear or needing to sell it or buy it or put it away. It's usually something outside of that. It's very quick because we spend so much time around this stuff. It's easy for us to point the finger at the gear or the lack of gear. 90% of the time, that's not the issue. The issue is outside of that.
What can you do? What's her name? Is it Marie Kondo? Does it spark joy? And then if you're going to sell it or get rid of it.
I actually just remembered that I sold like a couple of guitars, which one I regret deeply, even though I looked like an idiot with it. It was a Flying V, Gibson Flying V, and I looked like
a Flying V.
Like a fat twat with a Flying V, like an idiot.
Flying V's are cool, man.
Yeah, and I sold it, and I regret it. I sold Les Paul, but I don't regret it at all. It was just like a complete dog shit. Well, it wasn't dog shit. I was dog shit. I just didn't like it.
What about gear, everyone here? Like, is there anything that you have where have been thinking about, shall I actually just sell this? Do you have any stuff which is, like it could be on its way out?
Some of my modules, I sort of since getting the analog rhythm and pairing it with the Octatrack, I look at the modular a little bit different now, and I'm like, there's a lot of modules in there I'm not going to use now because I've got a drum machine, and so I sort of, whether I downsize or just swap out, there's a lot of things in there that I'm a little bit like, do I really need a Bassimilis anymore now that I've got an analog rhythm? It's just sort of things like that,
Why would you sell modules? I always like really puzzled by this idea. Like they don't take a lot of space. They don't cost all that much, right? You wouldn't be able to kind of buy a car with it. So I'm wondering. Sorry?
You can buy other modules.
Yeah.
So for me, it would be like a swapping in and out thing. So
if I would be in a position that I couldn't afford a new module, I have to like sell some old stuff, I'd probably be like thinking about other stuff rather than playing with modules, to be frank. So
Well, there you go.
I don't know. I think some people hype buy modules because modular is cool. The newest module came out, and then they get it and realize they can't use it at all, or so they sell it to get the next hype module that they will no longer be able to do anything with, and the cycle just perpetuates. Or rents do.
I have this story with mutable instruments because I have a bunch of modules from mutable. But every time I put them in, I play with them like for a couple of days, and then I just take them out because I just can't glue with them. I don't know what it is. It just doesn't work for me at all.
What, even rings?
Especially rings.
Oh, that's like my favorite.
Probably the only one I really, really loved, and it took me a while to take it out, was what was the version of, the Platts. Platts is brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant voice, but it just takes a bit too much space in a box for me.
Platts is the new braids, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I think it's wonderful, and it has great controls, and it sounds great, and it has this lo-fi quality to it, which I really like. But it's just, I don't know what it is. Like, it just isn't exciting for me. I've been thinking about getting Telharmonic by Make Noise. I find the sound and sort of the interaction with it really exciting, but I can't get one in European Union. It's just like one seller for some like $1 million or something.
I take a little bit of a different approach with that sort of, they don't take up much space. Why get rid of them? Whatever. To me, it's just kind of, it's like, yeah, but you're not using them. If you're not using them, just get them. Let somebody else use them. Get them out of your life. Whatever. For me, that's why I have the space to keep them. Sure, and it's relatively. I wouldn't. In fact, I wouldn't say there's nothing cheap about Eurorack. But like, if you're not using them, just move on with them. Like, I feel like a lot of people worry about this, and it seems like it's come up a couple times, like the idea that you're going to sell something and then 5 years later it's going to be worth $1.4 million. It's not like the synths are not an investment. Like they're going to go up a little bit and then they're going to come down, and to like think about keeping something because maybe it'll be discontinued and you'll regret it or whatever. Who cares? Like most of us all just said, if we could keep one piece of gear, it would be the computer
and the SH101.
But isn't it a bit like with the records? Like if you're not listening to some records, you wouldn't be selling them, right? It's just, I'm a bit surprised by this approach, to be frank, because I know there might be a time when you kind of think, okay, maybe like rings would be great with this idea I'm having. So yeah,
that is something that I've had happen to me more than once, especially in the past 6 months or so. Just like some random, the Sherman filter bank.
Oh yeah,
it's such like it does this one thing. It does it really well, but it just does this one thing, and I don't really use it that much. But when I do, it's like, that is exactly what I needed. And I've actually listed it a couple times, and then it doesn't sell, and I end up pulling it out of the box and using it, and I immediately pull the listing down because it's like, nah, this thing it has something. So that is a really good point, that down the line you may have just one thing you want to do with a particular piece of gear. And also that is definitely a brain twister, the thing with records. Like, just because you're not listening to it, you wouldn't. That is a good point.
Yeah, when you put it that way, I see why you think that way. Any other opinions before we move on? I'm
not sure I entirely agree. I've bought records that I haven't even listened to.
No one cares what you think.
I can.
No, I mean, yeah, I have the same. Like I have a few records I haven't listened to, and they still are like in wraps. But it doesn't mean like I will pull them out and like try to sell them actively or something.
Yeah.
Just before we move on, Broken Semitone says, I want to see Nick smash his drum brute.
A lot of the chat says that. So how many tips in the super chat do we need for Nick to smash a drum brute?
Oh shit!
I will do it for free. Just have to find a good place.
If we get $1 in the super chat,
yeah,
Nick will smash his drum brute up live on YouTube.
Yeah, I will. I practiced
$1
on a printer,
and we'll give it to charity.
Well, for giving it to charity, $1 is almost insulting.
Okay,
that's why I don't know. We need to make it something to strive for.
This is going to be a YouTube phenomenon, and if you smash it.
Oh yeah,
I think this could be quite a good sort of like primal therapy, kind of like sort of viral
like
sensation
or something.
We'll just basically
there's something artistic about smashing things, especially like guitars and stuff like that. There's an art behind it.
I've got like one acoustic guitar which I bought such a long time ago for like no money at all, and I never play it, and it's kind of broken. And I thought like I could take it somewhere and fill it with like basically dynamite, and like maybe film it in slow motion, and then score like a soundtrack to it or something, or like do like a kind of sort of pseudo performance art thing of just smash it until it's basically in pieces.
I have an idea for it. Do like a YouTube video, like really ambient, lots of reverb, potted plant, like just the guitar with some like contact mics and stuff, and it's very soothing, very ambient, and then slowly the video you just start doing things more and more aggressively until you're literally pulling the guitar apart,
splintering it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of. I don't care about the guitar; it costs like nothing. But I mean, yeah, like the thing is that it could make some interesting sounds. That's the thing. If I restrung it, and then I kind of throw things at it, hit it with a mallet or something, it might make some interesting sounds. We could do it. We could record it like quadraphonically or in 5.1 or something. It could be like an experience. So. If we get $1,000 in the super chat, then we'll do that.
Oh,
we get $10,000.
Yes, there we go. That's an amount. Pull out your wallets, everyone. If you want to see Nick smash a drum brute, we'll do it for $1,000 in the super chat. YouTube will give Ned $2.50 for his send to charity.
Yeah, I'll get like 2% of that. Or like rather than smash it, you could just take it apart very slowly with a collection of instruments like pliers, tweezers.
Might be like an ASMR thing,
Yeah, like what was that? James May, the assembler or something.
Yeah.
We've digressed into we're not into something. We've digressed into nothing. I think we should move on to the next question.
No.
Okay.
No. Before we do that, I've just had an idea for what we call it. We call it distress it like an idiot.
Okay, I'm down. I'll get some things to break.
We'll do a compress it spin-off called Distress It Like an Idiot, and we'll take things to pieces.
Would it at some point be called Shabby Chic, you think?
Be big with the hip crowd. Okay,
we'll put a pop
moving
in the background.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Daniel.
No,
You're doing a great
on.
job with the questions. Thanks.
Yeah. From bottom text, is anyone obsessed with building smaller setups, portable and small, battery powered even though you have a studio room, you still want mini studios in the off chance you ever leave your house? I'll start off. No. When I leave my house, I don't want to be making music. I leave the house to go have fun in the sun, and then I come back to make music for hours. I don't want to bring that around with me. Anyone else? Do you like small battery-powered setups?
I mean, I've spent a lot of time traveling where it wasn't convenient maybe to be on my laptop. We were talking earlier, like I've used a trackpad to make music on Ableton, and that just is terrible. So the iPad is actually like super convenient for like an all-in-one, like, the programs for making music on the iPad anymore are just kind of mind-blowing. And just for being on an airplane, like dinking around on an iPad, I mean, it's kind of great. I don't know that I'd want, like a synth in a suitcase kind of thing. I mean, I like the novelty of, oh, look, I'm a secret agent. Let me open my suitcase up and play some music. But the practicality of it is, the iPad is just so much smaller, and I throw it in my bag, and it's there with me anywhere I go. But I agree with the getting out of the house to get away from making music too. So.
I have
to that point. I guess I do have like Core Gadget and Endless on my phone. So if I do have an idea I want to do, I'll open up that app and make a little beat. But as far as like the synths, yeah, no, I don't need to show everyone my $1,000 OP1. I don't need to flex like that.
The OP1 does have a little bit of a I'm making music in the park type of vibe, but
for Instagram.
I want people to see me making music in the park.
Yeah. And then they'll think that I'm cool because I'm so insecure.
Okay, let's not make fun of too many people. Let's keep it
sorry.
I don't want to alienate the audience.
I'm not making fun of people who make music in the park. You go make music in the park. I think it's a wonderful thing. When I was a younger man, I bought one of the like original K oscillators, which are battery powered, and then that quickly progressed to a little battery powered guitar amp. And then some of my friends kind of did similar things. They kind of got their little battery powered things out and bought battery powered amps. I had a friend of mine who would make music on a Game Boy, and then it very, very slowly turned into a little crew of us going to festivals and just walking around. Just like making little sort of random rave, and then we'd, if we were walking from like one tent to another or going to the bar or something, we just whip them out and just start like, we had the battery powered amps like over our shoulders and stuff. That was like cool. so much fun. Huge amount. I wouldn't do it now, I'm too old, but like back then it was like so much fun. People would like walk up to us and go, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And we like, we don't know. It's just there was something fun about that. I mean, yeah, I think battery powered setups are pretty cool. There's something sort of, if what's coming out like doesn't sound battery powered, I think that's quite impressive.
I spoke about this a couple minutes ago. I'm not into it. I have the Dirty Wave Mate, and I have a hard time getting into like any sort of like. It's great to be able to make some loops or something that you can manipulate later, but I don't ever actually get anything productive done if I'm not in a creative space. Some of that is how I am. Like I kind of need that mental shift of now I'm in this space, I do this thing. If I'm not in that space, I don't really do it, especially because the whole like micro setup and even with the iPad like John was talking about, a lot of that same stuff, not all of it, but a lot of it you can do on your iPhone, and most of us don't ever really do that. I mean, like I always have my iPhone on me, and I never really mess with it. So but I do think there's something with all that being said, I think there is something really, really important about small, restricted setups, even if that's something like, okay, I'm just going to use the Octatrack. Yeah, like the Octatrack is capable of so much, and it's not really a limitation, but still something about just really focusing in on something small. I think there's a lot of merit in that from a creative standpoint, more than a mobility standpoint.
I think there's also the idea of doing something on the iPad like with Auxy, where you can actually export it and then import it into Ableton and then deal with it sort of properly. I've done that a few times. I like doing that on the iPad.
My experience with iPad music was very, very short. I sort of thought, yeah, I could totally get into it. It was sort of an extension or an upgrade of that initial sort of walk around rave idea of like, yeah, like a bunch of us can go and sit in the park and get our iPads out and all start jamming together and like, you know, around the camp, the sort of sit down campfire rave thing. But it was quite a short lived. I wouldn't want to say it was a novelty for me, because there's a lot of really, 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 really good stuff now. But it was just it's a little bit too casual, I think, for me to take it seriously. Not for anyone else, like, you know, what everyone else thinks is fine. But for me, it's just like, yeah, I could have just brought my laptop. I mean, a laptop's essentially the best mobile battery powered thing there is. So just use that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I quite like the idea, actually. I don't think you have to take it seriously, though. It's just like, I enjoy as many issues I have with Tracker. You can power it with a power bank, and I usually take it on the plane with me and use noise canceling headphones and just dick around with it, because it's a lot of fun to explore, and you don't have any pressure on you as well. It's sort of like a meditative state when you just kind of pull out sounds of it. And I think it's, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you can sort of enjoy this moments when you don't have any kind of pressure of getting the results out. You just enjoy exploring and enjoy building stuff. And even if you encounter something good you want to build upon later, you can just export the stems out of it, which is like super fun.
All right. Next question, Damien.
All right. Next question, and this is a big one from Bob Balash Bell. How has the world turning to mush since 2020 affected your goals, work, etc.? To be honest, probably the best thing that ever happened to me. If the world didn't go the way it did in 2020, I would not be here doing these things, nor would I have had the time to put so much time into music. I don't know. Ever since that happened, my quality of life has vastly improved across all aspects, as has my work ethic, and goals have become a lot larger in scope and whatnot. So for me, it was a positive net. I'll say a net positive coming out of that.
I think it's sort of similar for me, because I got back into using Ableton after a very long gap because of the offer they had in 2020, where it was free. The whole suite was free for 90 days, and then they made it 180 days, and then I ended up buying it, and I bought a push. Enjoying it so much, and I'm making music all the time now after not having done it for several decades.
Wow, that's brilliant.
I agree. I wouldn't
Good
be,
on you, mate.
Yeah, I wouldn't be in this space. I've never had a dedicated space before with music equipment, and this is sort of a result of like moving out to the countryside, but also during the lockdown, when we were literally like in the UK, there was a long period when you were only allowed out for 1 hour a day. And I started this thing on Instagram where I did 100 consecutive days of 1 minute's worth of music, and all of a sudden that was probably more music than I've ever done in a way. So yeah, positive outcome.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, it changed my life. It might not have done much for my productivity. Well, maybe it did, but it changed. I don't know, but it's changed my life. I quit my job.
Quit your job. That, you know.
I quit my job, and now I do this. Whatever this is, I do it full time, and it's working. So, you know, that's fine. I can't say it's like that for lots of other people, and it's a little bit. I sometimes feel a little bit uncertain about sharing that, because obviously lots of people went through difficult times. But for me, it was like the kick up the arse that I probably needed, really. Yeah. Anyone else?
I'll agree with all of that. I mean, I've changed jobs. I've started, you know, taking music more seriously, bigger goals, you know. So yeah.
What happened in 2020?
A guy ate a bat, apparently. I don't know. I don't keep up with the news much, nor do I go out much.
I
There
think
was, like,
there was a
some
car
politics.
crash. There's something. I don't
There's a
know.
car crash.
Wasn't there like
I don't know.
there was a big forest fire?
Yeah. Fire.
Yeah, yeah. The Amazon was on fire. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Next question, Damien. You're doing a great job on the questions. This is great. I don't have to do anything. Sit here and drink.
More comments right now. I think we can wait for some more questions to roll in. Any questions internally for the group?
I did have one question, which was, who has suggestions for a very satisfying end of chain kind of thing for like working with hardware? So like I'm always working on my doorless setup, and sometimes I think I want something to run the entire mix through that's just going to really get me hard. Something like the analog heat, where it's a little, well, drum, but not, yeah. I mean, I would just go for drum. Something like the analog heat, but is there something along the lines of like a stereo,
Yes,
in and out sort of saturator, compressor thing, like a magic thing that's just like, whoa, everything's coming alive?
overstayer modular channel.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say as well.
What's that? Can you post a link?
Yeah. Overstayer devices.
It's a filter, compressor, saturator, magic box. I don't have one. I wish I did, and I will have one at some point for exactly what you're talking about. But the whole time you were talking, it was just like, that's the one. That's what you want.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nick, go on.
No, sir, I just want to say I completely agree. I had it on test for a couple of weeks. I haven't gotten it because I didn't have like any money to spare at the time, but I think I will at some point because it's brilliant. It just destroys your stereo signal completely, and it still sounds amazing. It's a brilliant piece of gear.
That was sort of something that I know we talked a little bit about this earlier, but I wasn't really paying attention. But there was definitely that's definitely something I noticed about your stuff, Gus, was that even though I'm sort of hearing it on Instagram, as I was like, there's something magic happening at the end of the line here, and I was like, I got to know what that is, and that kind of just made me think, you know what? Maybe that's actually something that's sort of like I could probably do it with what I have. I've got a Line 6 HX Stomp, which is like just got a ridiculous amount of distortions and compressors on it. It's digital, and I kind of have I don't really like the operating system. I don't really like the panel, and I was just thinking, oh yeah, but what if there was just something at the end that's just like really nicely laid out, 2 in, 2 out, that type of thing.
If you would have asked me this 2 days ago, I would have said it probably has something to do with analog heat. After yesterday and this morning, when I was messing with mixing some tracks, and I was A/Bing the analog heat. I also have a old Mackie mixer as well that I run stuff through, and it seems like if you're keeping everything in hardware, if you're going, even if it's digital, but you're still outside of the box, and you go into an analog mixer, or through a cheap compressor or two, and then into the mixer, and then into Baum or Boom. Is it Boom or Baum? Does anybody know? Anyway, and then from that into analog heat, or maybe on an aux channel from the mixer going into the Sherman filter bank, or this tube amp that I have. If you keep everything outside of the box, it seems like it sounds really great. And I'm assuming that has something to do with the conversion with my audio interface. I don't really know 100%. But when I was A/Bing yesterday, okay, here's the Ableton mix, and then here's the mix when I run everything through this analog mixer and that whole chain that I just went through. Ableton consistently sounded just better to my ears. I think a lot of what my sound has to do with is the samples, essentially. All of basically everything except for the drum samples. I don't ever make any drum samples. Just doesn't really seem to make sense to me, you know, as far as the time spent in designing a kick drum, but it still just sounds like a kick drum. So I don't really do it. Everything else, unless I'm doing more musical stuff, I have kind of designed myself. And I think that's actually where a lot of that sound that you're talking about is coming from, because everything is always extremely overcompressed or oversaturated or has effects, and it's just a combination of all these things. And then all of those things are maybe again going through, you know, another, it's just layers and layers and layers done over and over and over again. I think the only way you're going to get that sort of immediate magic box is to step up to something like an overstayer. Without doing that, I think you're always going to have to, you know, do step by step by step by step. And maybe Nick could comment on this, but it seems like to really get that warm, crunchy sound, you have to do it little by little by little by little. If you try and just add it all at once, it's usually not going to work out. Would you agree with that, Nick?
You're on mute, Nick.
I think Nick's either muted himself or muted us.
Oh yeah, sorry, I muted myself. Yeah, I would agree, but I also feel it might be this fatness and this grit that's coming out maybe because of AD conversion happening in 301. It might be also the case. I don't know, like it's difficult for me to say with regards to your setup. I think Overstair is a fantastic device. There's a learning curve, I'm sure. It's quite versatile, but it takes some time for you to learn it. But in the end, I think it's worth it. The only thing I wanted to say is that I think I don't think there's just like one magic box which does it. Like one day you have a mood for something like gritty, the other maybe something else. But I wanted to say that once you kind of buy something, I think you should take time and commit to it to learn it, and then you can pull all kinds of stuff out of it. And I just think Overstair is a good way to do this because it has such a broad range of sounds you can do with it.
Even the drum brute?
Drum brute, no. I've actually tried to do like a lot of stuff on drum brute. I was very committed to make it sound good. And it's just whatever I throw at it, like EQs, compression, wiggling knobs, nothing worked for me. Like some channels work fine. Even kick drum might sound fine, even though it's not as percussive as I want, but it just doesn't work. Like my only kind of advice there would be just to learn the stuff you already own first. If you want to kind of something like deliberate, get it and just take your time to learn it.
Can I ask you, user-friendly, the Mackie mixer you have, which one is it? And do you use it to drive the signal? Is it the CR1604 or whatever it's called?
CR16 something.
Is it the old one, not the VLZ? It's
Yes, the VLZ was the one that I was told is not, don't get that one. It's not as good.
I got the old one as well, but I've not so do you funnel things from Ableton into that mixer and then back again so you can just do the drive?
That's exactly what I was talking about, not sounding as good.
Oh, okay.
I've tried that multiple times, and when I'm actively doing it, it sounds fantastic. Once I A/B it and basically turn the external audio effect on Ableton, basically once I turn that off and stop doing anything external and just stay in Ableton, it sounds better. except for when I'm staying completely outside of the box and I'm coming out of rhythm or the modular or something like that going through the mixer. But that may be a result like that. It's just harder for me to A/B in that situation. So ultimately, that's why I've kind of just recently come around to thinking, okay, I don't think it has anything to do with the end of chain. I think it has to do with that I'm 90% of the time, my samples are created by running it through stuff like this mixer, the analog heat, the Sherman filter bank. It's happening earlier in the chain. It's not actually at the end of the chain that sort of sound and grit and punch is coming through. It's happening almost like when I don't even realize it's happening, when I'm just kind of, going at it, just trying to destroy and fuck up sound.
But the mixer is part of that story when you're making the samples.
Yes, just at an earlier part, I would say.
I bought it, and I bought it super cheap, like
Yep.
hardly anything broken, but I've got it fixed now, and I'm sort of just using it as a mixer. But I know about driving it, and it's like a classic mixer to use for electronic music. So I'm gonna try just to make some samples that way.
I would recommend driving not just the volume or the gain, but the EQs as well. I think have a really different color. If you just basically, rather than just turning the volume up, you'll get this real crispy, harsh distortion. But if you just max out the high, mid, and low rather than the gain, you'll get it. It'll be a different tone. It's much smoother, much. I don't know. There's something special about it, and I think that's one of the fascinating things about using these really complicated, but ultimately cheap analog chains is how much each part affects the other. So, if you just turn the bass up on one track, that's affecting everything after it. You know what I mean? So anything that the mixer is going into after the fact is going to be changed by just turning the bass up, or the same can be said before that happens, et cetera, et cetera. I don't feel like that happens as much in the box or in digital. It's seems a bit cleaner. It's like, okay, I turn the kick up, now it just sounds like the kick's louder. Whereas in the analog world, it seems like when you turn the kick up, that could potentially change a lot of
The
different
character,
things.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I with regards to like analog mixing, if you have a mixer, I used a lot mixer for like parallel EQ and parallel compression when you, for example, use channel 1 and channel 2 to drive your original kick and just overdrive the shit out of it on a channel 2 and sort of mix them together. It's not a parallel compression in a way, and you can compress it as well. It's just sort of blending the original stuff with heavily EQ'd and heavily compressed sample. It can bring a lot of fun. Of course, you used like 2 channels for one instrument, but it may sound really great. And I actually had this old console before, which is like live console actually, Allen and Heath, like GL something. It's quite a big one, and the EQ when you overdrive, so the kind of preamp sounded like cheap preamps. You can't do much about them. But if you drive the EQ, which goes after the preamps, and you kind of blend with the original signal, it just sounds fantastic. I mean, it sounds just right. You can do all the same stuff in digital, of course, but you have to do a lot of tweaking to kind of find it, which just analog just does, because it's like a bunch of components going after one after another. So yeah, but I have a feeling that user-friendly stuff sounds great without much processing in the end. And that's, I think, what he confirms, because it sort of feels that way. I usually kind of hear when people go into like over compression or a lot of processing on the mix bus, but it's usually not required. It's just maybe not loud enough or maybe too loud. and it becomes like, or like unpleasantly distorted, or not kind of saturated enough for it to kind of sound fat. But I feel like it just sounds right without much post-processing on top.
One last thing I wanted to mention was the group Empty Set. I'm sure most of you have probably heard of them before. I hadn't until just recently. A friend of mine introduced me to them. It's again Empty Set, and their album Demerge. It's definitely a huge inspiration for me over the past 6 months or a year. And it seems like I'm guessing their tone comes from essentially overdriving and compressing everything to the max. And I don't know, I really learned a lot from listening to that album a few times. I would highly recommend it.
Can you share a link to them? Because I'm getting a lot of trash.
If you've got the YouTube chat open, put a link in the chat. Hi, Alan. Alan's here.
Hello.
He's on holiday in Dorset.
Hey, Alan.
Hey, fellas. I couldn't miss out on all the fun, so I thought I'd say hello.
I was just about to pitch your question to Nick, but you can maybe do it yourself because you're here now. About reverse engineering the overstayer as an Ableton effects chain, but now you can do it.
Well, I was just...
Now you could say what I just said.
Well, as you know how impressed I am with Nick's skills, so he managed to do it with the Poltex. I know this may be slightly more challenging, but yeah, we could save ourselves the best part of three grand if you can do that, Nick.
I don't think it's possible. I think there's a lot of like hardware stuff going on. You can achieve similar effects with like saturator, with compressor, but I feel there's a lot going on inside that box, which kind of sum of all the small parts together sounds just right with it. It at least feels like it. It has different stages for saturation, different types of saturation. It handles compression in an interesting way, because it's not only kind of filtering the sidechain, it's also it works somehow like very in a bit of different way with sidechain. That compressor just does what it does in overstayer. And on top of this, you have to think of this device as not a kind of sum of its parts. It's like it's a single working circuit which interacts with each other. So when you kind of push the front a little bit, the back starts to behave a little bit differently, because it's just kind of, it interacts together. So I don't think it can be replicated. You can get close, though.
Is the chain normal in the modular channel? So I'm not sure what the exact order is, but you have the filter, compressor, saturate. Can you change?
Yeah, you can switch. You can switch.
So you can go
around.
saturator first, then to the filter, then to the compressor, or any other combination.
At least as much as I remember, I think so. Yeah, you can. I think you can switch things around. Can you though? Yeah, I remember you can like switch things out, but I had a feeling that you can actually.
That would be the other thing, is I wouldn't be surprised if you can't change that, but they're in the right order. Like you wouldn't want to change them.
Yeah, I mean, there's no harm to changing it, right? So you can sort of distort the signal before it goes into compression. It's completely fine as well. Like whatever works for you. And I feel like Overstayer is it's a color box in a way. It's not like this clean sort of device which you want to be able to control completely. It's to me, it sounds like a pure color box which just does its thing, and you can't fully control it. You're just like a trained dog. You just wiggle things around and just enjoy whatever comes out. That's the beauty of it, I guess. I may be able to use it like in a mixing situation, but I don't think like in mastering I would have as much like control over it to be able to use it reliably.
I was talking to Nathan Moody about it at one point or another, and he was saying a similar thing that, you know, he said if you if you have the money and you're interested in it, buy it. You won't regret it. But he said he couldn't use it for his work because it's not stabbed. You know, you have such a wide range in between things. You know, not being able to, it just wouldn't work for mastering.
Yeah, I guess so. I think you can switch things inside it, like EQ sidechain, for example, before you. But I don't feel you can switch like distortion before compression and so on. For some reason, I thought it's possible.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
I was just going to ask Nick one last thing about this before we move on. Traditionally, what is supposed to come first? Like, if you were to look into the mixing or mastering handbook, what would they say? Distortion first and then compression, or compression first and then distortion?
That's a good question.
Yeah, or indeed EQ. Because I know on it's like on the old sort of SSL mixers, I only know this because of Reason's SSL mixer that they've made, where you can dynamically change the routing of like the EQ and then the compression. And I was like, oh, is that something I need to be concerned about?
Yeah, so I would say EQ first, then compressor, then whatever you have like next, like a limiter, for example. Because I would the kind of the role of a compressor to be able to like balance things out, and I would probably go for balancing shaping the sound first, shaping the curve first before I go into compressor. That's how it's set up in my chain, at least. It first goes to stereo processing with multiband compressor on the inset, and this gives me sort of before I change the signal with EQ or compressor or limiter, it gives me kind of an understanding how wide is the track, how wide can I make it, and hear all the garbage that might be there, which I'm unhappy with, for example. Then it goes into EQ, then it goes into this very, very mu compressor, which acts this sort of mild but pretty colorful compression, if I use it at all. And then it goes into limiter for me. And sometimes you have to use de-esser, but I don't have like many tracks which, not the de-esser usually goes first for me. I don't usually have a lot of tracks with this like bright vocals, because I just don't. But if I do, I may just push it with the EQ a little bit to kind of take the top end out a little bit. But yeah, generally speaking, like I would go into EQ, just clean up the track first, then compressor, then limiter, or whatever you might have on top of it as well.
Unless Damien's got any questions ready, I've got a question.
There is a few here in the chat, but they're quick ones.
Go on then.
Bob Balash Bell asked, has anyone had a go on the Play Different mixers? No, never heard of it. Anyone else play different mixers? No? Okay. Sorry, Balash. And then this one from Bottom Text. Is there a Discord server everyone here is in? How do I join? There is a Discord server.
My one.
It's Ned's. Ned, how do we get there?
I'll take care of that now.
Okay. There will be a link in the chat. And then, yeah, that's the end of the questions, Ned, if you want to ask yours.
Well, I was just wondering what everyone's thoughts are on the 500 series, because I think it looks pretty exciting, if expensive. It's kind of like Eurorack for signal chains. Anyone?
Never
heard of it.
tried anything.
I have the deepest fascination with 500 series. I really, really want to get into it. I still am just having a lot of trouble seeing the point in spending that much money towards it. It really is expensive. And yes, I'm as interested. I'm as interested as you are for sure. Yeah, it definitely is, but I just wonder if it's one of those things like if it's a step beyond that, because with Eurorack, you can buy a couple cheap modules and get something really interesting and worthwhile from that. Like it really, relatively speaking, as far as Eurorack goes, you can do a lot with a little. With 500 series, I feel like you're approaching that last 10%. And that last 10% is really, really technical and really expensive to get. So you could buy a cheap, $500 or $600 mono EQ for a 500 series, and it might, give something, and especially from like a more, analog sound processing experimental side of things. But if you're talking like, end of chain, really clean things up, it seems to me like you really have to be ready to spend a lot. There's the what are the blue boxes? They're blue with silver knobs. Nick, surely it's, the name starts with an E.
Alicia?
Yes. So there's those are there's a couple stereo 500, and they're like $1,000 a piece. And I listened to a few different comparisons because they have a plug-in version and they have a 500 series version. I personally had a really hard time telling the difference, and if anything, almost saw that the plug-in version sounded better. So
just some quick back of the napkin math. While you mentioned the one Alicia plugin's like $1,000, like then you also have to get a box, which is $1,000, and like each one of these modules is like, so like if you get a eight slot box, that's 10 grand right there.
Well, and even if you like, to the other thing that I think about is it would make a lot of sense if you were looking to do a mobile field recording setup. So you wanted to have a lunchbox that you could take out with some nice preamps, a nice EQ, a nice compressor, and kind of record sounds out in the field. Then I think it makes a lot of sense. But like as an end of chain for electronic gear, I think you, at least to my ears, it seems like you really have to be ready to put a lot into it. And again, it just, I don't know. It just seems like it's for that last 10% that chances are you could get there with a little bit better practice and a few more plugins for a lot cheaper. I don't know. But I so badly want them because they look so just delicious.
There's something about, and also I'm sort of thinking how that works conversely with a load of rack mount, I forget, 19-inch format rack mount stuff. Like, I think there's just something, for a while I was kind of like, I want to get a 500 series mic preamp for YouTube. And then I bought this DBX 286S, which is fine. But I was a little bit like, it's a little bit like having a really good rack mount system in something that's like a tenth of the size. Is it 10 times the price?
I thought 500 series was generally a little bit cheaper, but then you had to have the case, and then generally speaking, you had to buy two. So like,
yeah, a lot of them are mono, aren't they?
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I own a couple. So if you wanted to go into 500 like 5 years ago, you'd be cashing out much more than you would do now, because there are a lot of affordable cases. Behringer does one, which comes out with from Clark Technique brand. It costs like 120 euros or something for, if I'm not mistaken, 4 spaces or 6 spaces or something. I don't really remember, but it's much more affordable now. And there is also the kind of the range of modules you can select from is much broader than it was before. So I would say if you really want to go hardware, and for some reason it has to be 500 because of, I don't know, like a space or something, you could definitely buy some like affordable 500. I don't see much reason to do so, because like I would say plugins sound excellent to me. Like I wouldn't kind of go for hardware if I wouldn't be like committed to hardware. But otherwise, I actually posted this question in Discord. Well, not a question, just a rant, really, because I have this SSL bus compressor in 500, which I think costs something like 2,000 euros or something. And it's essentially a bunch of like, it's 2 PCBs with a bunch of like ICs on it and so on. And you can buy a Bus Plus, which is 19-inch rack, like box, huge box with a lot of additional stuff on top of this, what bus compressor can do. And it costs about the same, something like 200 euros more expensive or something. And it doesn't make sense financially, only because like SSL probably can charge you for this 500 modules, 2000s, they do. So I think it's just about your picks for it. Like you can do it pretty affordably if you want to, but you have to consider also, you have to buy cables, you have to have a studio interface, which allows you to kind of route and loop all this gear. If you want to, you can go with patch bay as well. So it's additional expenses, however expensive you want to go. So every time you think of getting hardware, it's a lot of additional expenses on top of it. And if you kind of, I remember myself like thinking like, I want to go like and work on a console, on a desk, like however desk I could afford at the time. And I thought it's going to cost me like whatever desk I'm just using, but it's not. It's a lot more because you have to buy interface, which gives you like 16 channels or more. You have to buy cables, which are pretty expensive. So yeah, I would think like twice in hards if you want to go hardware or not. Like consider all this stuff.
Well, and also just like, not that it's a huge deal, but also literally just plugging everything in. Like with 500 series, that kind of simplifies things because you'll have just one power cord for a couple different modules, but still just that's still just yet another thing. Now you have that behind your desk you need to manage. Now you have to make sure that the power cords aren't too close to all the audio cords and everything else. It just, I don't know, it seems like a lot, especially for that final couple percent better that you're going to get from it, that 80 or 90% of the people aren't going to notice. And I say all that while being just as fascinated and addicted to 500 series outboard gear. Like I think it's all great, but I think it mostly comes down to a sound design thing more than that home stretch sort of thing.
I think 500 makes a lot of sense in a live situations when you have to do live gigs, because it doesn't take a lot of real estate, right? You just have a box with all the kind of stuff you have to use and you want to use. But yeah, hardware versus software, I think, is a whole different thing. Like I don't think we should slide into this conversation.
Well, yeah, perhaps not this far on in the episode. That's more like an entire episode by itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
But software would win, wouldn't it?
I would say convenience always wins. At least if you do this professionally, I think convenience always wins, and software is just so much more convenient than any hardware.
Well, that's the episode. That's that episode done then, isn't it? We just did a software versus hardware episode in 15 seconds.
The only other thing I would mention about it, just I feel like I've done nothing but bash the whole, not bash, but just I don't really see the point. But the one big thing, which is a really important thing, is the tactile creative experience of using hardware. So what you're going to do with a mouse and an EQ will be a different thing than what you're going to do with a hardware EQ. You're just because you're touching it. So, but that's getting into a more philosophical thing than a sound thing, I think.
I'd say mixing is a whole lot different on a console than on a computer, even with a like how do you call it, like control surface. On a console, it's a completely different experience for me, at least. But the problem, again, convenience, because you have to recall stuff and you basically work in one thing at a time, and you have to recall if you have to do some changes. So it's just like really, really a hassle. And if you know your shit, I'm not sure if it kind of makes sense, because you can do all this stuff with plugins equally good. So
I at some point in my life, I want to mix on a console because I just want to have the experience of doing it, even if it's just once, and even if it's just for one song, because I've never done it. And well, I've been in the presence of someone else who was doing it, but that was when I didn't really know how they worked. I still don't know how they worked, but I think I would maybe orientate myself in maybe 10, 20 minutes that I could start to think, all right, now I want to just like go to work on this. And I'm going to do it one day. And I don't care if I have to pay a studio to let me in to do it on a console. I'm not going to buy a console. I'll just hire a studio.
Yeah, I actually bought it. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say there's just something about it that just kind of makes me think it's got to be experienced at least once for me.
Well, Duncan, we were going to get you a Gorillagram for your birthday, but maybe this would be
a Gorillagram.
Yeah, like it's like a. But maybe we could get you a mixing experience instead, a console experience.
A Gorillagram.
Yeah. It's no problem. Like, we'll do the other thing. We'll hook you up. Don't worry.
Can't you cash out and go to like Abbey Road or something?
I didn't know that I shared my furry fetish with everyone.
Whoa!
Shit.
You could gate crash the SSL.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
You could gate crash the SSL headquarters. I've actually walked past it. It's in a wood. We were randomly on a walk. I thought, oh, is that the SSL that I know? Yes, it is. It's just in a wood in sort of north of Oxford.
Is it?
Yeah.
Right. I didn't know that.
I think audience is much more accessible in this regard, because I remember when I was looking for a console, they've actually, through a dealer here locally, invited me to go to the factory and try it out, like go to the control room, like try the Audient consoles. I didn't go, but they're very welcoming guys. So
I didn't know that Audient made consoles. I was quite close to buying one of their interfaces at one point.
Yeah, they have this 8C24, the big format console. And I think it's quite good based on my kind of understanding, at least. But they use the same preamps in their interfaces as well.
As far as using a mixer is concerned to mix tracks, I keep noticing how difficult it is, really, and this kind of touches back on the whole analog thing, to keep the stereo image the same. So whether it be at the interface, whether it be at the mixer, or it's at a 2-channel compressor, you always you have to like fine tune to make sure that the left and right are just as loud as the other. It's usually not one control for both channels. Is there some part of it that is one of the good characters that come from the whole analog thing? Is that so you have a stereo track on 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Each one of them is maybe not exactly right. Like, you know, a lot of times you would have one thing panned over to the left and over to the right, but if you did want to have it at the same spot, but you can never quite get it there, just that slight sort of offset, adding a character to it. That kind of also, just as far as mixing on a console, seems like it would be another one of the things that would come out of it. It's just the combination of all of those different little accidents, and, you know, one knob is turned a little bit more than the other, adding to the sound, or maybe taking away from it.
That's not my experience, to be frank, because with hardware, so in proper studios, the hardware will be calibrated. It's going to be calibrated, like each channel separately has to be calibrated, that the voltage sort of comes in at the proper time and at a proper level. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. But you have to understand, like with hardware, it's always something goes wrong, like something is incorrect. I had a console which like channels weren't like pans left and right, or the master section were slightly off in one channel, like for a couple of dBs or something, or half dB, and you have to like compensate for it. But in proper studios, it's just and proper recording or mixing consoles just work differently than front of house consoles as well. They just route it differently, they calibrate it a bit differently, and it's just like modular consoles is a different beast, because you can take one channel out and just change it to like for another channel which is working, like insert, literally like take one out and insert another one in. It's a huge benefit in studios because you don't have to interrupt the session and just plug one in. As far as I know, and I spoke with like electronic engineer who was managing and repairing consoles in Germany for a while, like when consoles were actual thing which was used in radios and studios, and he said no one at the time really wanted to hear any kind of distortion, whatever it is, whether it's like color or whether it's unbalanced or something. It's garbage in, garbage out. So whatever you have on tape, whatever you have recorded through the mic, it has to be exactly the way it was. And no one really tried to use console as a sort of this mystical sort of analog device which adds something to your tracks. It's just they really wanted to do it like pristine. And that's why actually Studa was working so hard on the tape machines before digital recording came along, because they really had to compensate for all the flaws this analog process comes with, all the sort of problems with when tape is like saturating, when EQ, when signal changes while it goes through machine onto a tape, and it goes from the tape into a mixing console and then on another tape machine. So and that's why they were so expensive, because they had this sort of process of perfecting this sound to make sure it's whatever comes in, whatever you hear from the mic, whatever you play on your guitar, on a drum, has to be in this pristine quality on a tape or like through a console. So to answer your question, I wouldn't say people back there, engineers, tried to do this deliberately. I would say now the width and sort of the effects of the tracks mixed in modern sort of environments sounds much better than everything that was mixed kind of before. I think it's just a sort of a sentiment from like, I like that music better and it sounds better to me. But I don't think it's a question of like recording. Modern recording is just fantastic. Like plug in, like listen to Bad Guy on Billie Eilish. It just sounds incredible. I mean, the mix is just fantastic and it's super simple as well. And still it sounds like amazing to me.
Wow. Interesting stuff. Damien, what's the question situation?
There is no more questions.
Everyone's exhausted. Anyone got any questions they want to ask each other?
Yeah, I've got one. Anyone got a recommendation for chairs? I need something to sit on that's not a.
Oh yeah, I have one. You should really go for Herman Miller Aeron.
Oh, they're expensive.
I think it's just they're expensive. You can find used one on eBay, and if you have an opportunity to grab one like inexpensively, like I don't know, like $300-400 even, I would go for it. It just pays off. I've been sitting in a quite terrible chairs for a while, and I've bought 2 Aerons. You can see, or actually I bought 3, and since then it's just a whole different thing. Back doesn't hurt, your ass doesn't hurt, your legs doesn't hurt. It's just fantastic. It's well worth it, I would say. And it's sort of, they're solid as fuck. Like they will never break up. I think if you buy a new one, they have something like 30 years, like a guarantee or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you buy a new
Wow.
one.
Oh, shit. Okay.
You're not the first to mention Herman Miller. I've heard Herman Miller. I went with this gaming chair by TS.
I spent about $400 on a gaming chair, and it only lasted maybe a year and a half before it broke, and it
Yeah, Aaron, you can buy any part of Aaron on a eBay or whatever, like absolutely any, up to a screw or something. And if they break, you will be able to find it like 20 years from now. I'm pretty confident because they are bought in herds by companies. So it's like a default office chair for a lot of companies that will never go out of production.
They're basically buy an office chair. Buy a good quality office chair.
Very nice.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately.
For me, it's these armrests. They're really rickety. But
I did that too.
My elbows are at the perfect height for typing. I love it. And I can go all the way down to like lying down.
That's a perfect chair.
When are you gonna sleep in your computer chair?
Oh, it happens quite a bit.
Well, okay.
It does actually. Listening
Happened
to my own
this
music.
morning. I was going to like 5:30. Woke up about 10, still in the chair.
I do sometimes get quite sedated in this chair. I also, my sofa's quite nice. I quite like to sit on my sofa and do music there. That's all right. A nice sofa.
I got a nice beanbag chair. Well, it's not beans. It's like shredded memory foam, but it's like a 6-foot orb. Really nice.
That was a good question.
A follow up to that. Any good studio desk recommendations?
These like rising ones are popular, so you can work standing up.
Yeah. What do you want? Because if you're looking for one that goes up and down, and have the money, I really like the Nook desk, which they have a few different widths, and they have like an upper shelf and a lower shelf, and they're like super customizable. But they're not cheap. There's another one that I found. Oh, Evo desk. They're another like custom desk. They have a bunch of different options. They're super expensive too, though. Like
if you have a minimal setup, the output desk is really nice. It's got a three different sections. I think it's three sections of 3U or 4U for rack
Oh.
gear, and then lots of different holes and stuff like that to kind of route cables around and stuff. It's not quite big enough to do like mouse and keyboard plus a few boxes, depending on how ergonomic you want to be. But otherwise, it's a nice desk, and I think it's like 600, something like that.
Okay, not bad.
Another one to consider.
Here is a question from the chat from Jocelyn. Quick question: how about a decent headphones you recommend?
I'm happy to jump in here. Well, I'm currently wearing an old school pair of
Aerodynamics.
DT. I'm wearing old school DT 100s, which I'm not recommending. I've had Bayer Dynamic DT 770s for 15 years, and they still sound good. They are starting to fall apart. The felt inside is kind of gone. They're incredibly comfortable. I'm going to buy DT 990s next, about £150. Again, it's that thing of like, if something breaks, you can send them back and Bayer will repair them. They've always been incredibly comfortable. I sometimes forget I'm wearing them for a really long time. They don't chafe your head too much. I'm just wearing these ones now to look like I'm recording Band-Aid in the 80s. One ear off.
I'm actually using the same, just DT 150. They're really inexpensive, and I really love them because they isolate the sound quite well. I think they're comfortable enough to kind of be wearing. I'm not sure why. What's your problem with them? Why wouldn't you recommend them?
No, I am recommending them.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
DT
yeah.
150?
Oh, I think any Bayer Dynamic headphones, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Go Bayer Dynamic. I would just, I just thought like, I mean, I've had the DT 770s for so long. They've been totally reliable. I love them. Like, but next time they're on the way out. The next time I'm going to go 990s just because it's a step up. But I think any Bayer Dynamic headphones are perfectly fine. And in fact, sorry, you got the 150s?
Yeah.
I think I bought a pair of those as a present, as a birthday present for someone once.
Yeah, it's a classic studio recording headphones, right?
Yeah, like a monitoring headphone. But the 770s, they've just sounded really great for me when mixing as well. Like if I'm monitoring or mixing or experimenting, whatever, it's just like closing off the outside world, really, for me. And that's kind of what I want. I've had conversations like this with people, and there's sort of like difference between closed back and open back. And I'm not really too sure which one's which. But the person I was talking to saying that maybe the opposite was, so maybe open back ones are better for mixing if you're going to mix in headphones rather than just monitoring.
Yeah, that's what I hear as well. Like open back headphones do not strain your hearing that much, so you can work for longer. And it also, for whatever reason, and I have both like closed and open, but for whatever reason, people say open back my headphones just sound a little bit more natural because they let sound in, but I'm not sure if that's kind of important. I can't imagine like the sound going out of headphones and just coming back. I'm not sure what's the logic there, but that's the same. I hate working in headphones, so I don't use them much.
I love it.
I use the Shure SRH 840s. And I've actually gotten to the point where I actually use those over my focal monitors, just because I kind of got to a point more and more where it's like, well, I don't really trust any room that I'm in. I would trust my headphones more. And the other recommendation I wanted to make is hopefully you can decide on a pair and stick with them, because I feel like that's really where the ticket is to find a pair of headphones, get used to them, and know what you need to do on those particular headphones in reference to things outside. So the whole idea of like taking your mix out to your car or switching over to different headphones, if you always mix on the same pair of headphones, you know, okay, the bass is this loud in these headphones, so I need to offset that a little bit because I know when I take it into my car or on another pair of headphones, it's going to be way too loud or way too quiet or something like that. I think personally, I think that's the most important thing is getting used to whatever headphones or speakers you're using. I think they all sound pretty good.
You say you got focal monitors as well?
The 50s, not the 80s.
How do you find them?
I had never considered what you talked about until you talked about it.
Oh shit!
So fuck you.
It's all my fault.
No, I really like them. I think they're really nice. It's that I know I knew exactly what you were talking about when you were talking about it. It doesn't bother me that much. You can actually crank the volume, and as soon as you see the light turn on, if you dial it back, you basically can turn it'll be enough to set the speakers off, but then you can dial it back and they basically won't send any sound out at all. There's a technique to it because if you do it too quickly, yes, if you do it too quick, but I think they sound great otherwise, and I've heard nothing but good things about them, online and things like that. But again, I kind of got so caught up in the whole, well, if your room's not treated, then your speakers don't really matter thing. So I basically just don't even use speakers now.
I can't really use these in this tiny room in this flat. But like when I got them, I was kind of like, they are a little bit overpowering, but probably I won't need anything else ever. And if it ever gets to a point where I can really push them really hard, even if I'm in my 80s and I've got like my soundproof conservatory or something, then it was worth it. But right now it's sort of, I rarely use them, but they do, despite them being incredibly loud and intimidating, they do still sound good at lower volumes, which is always good. So I don't really need to push them that hard. But yeah, they are. I've got the 8-inch versions, and they're kind of like PA speakers. It's like a small club PA speaker.
That's
and
good in a way.
What's that, sorry?
Gives you a good reference. Anyway, I gotta go, gentlemen. It's been great talking. I will see you all next time.
Cheers,
Bye.
mate. Great job on the questions. Filled in the questions. Nice one. Okay. Well, yeah. Yeah. So what happens now? I guess I have to moderate the questions.
Uh-oh.
Damien's gone. Anyone else got any more questions in the chat, or anyone else got any more questions they want to ask?
I wanted to ask about the monitors because I got some. I've had really bad monitors, and I bought some cheapish ones, the KRKs. They seem to be everywhere. You know, the ones with the yellow cones on them. It's the KRK. I think they're the 5-inch ones. What does anyone have reviews on those, or are they?
Yeah, I had like 3-way KRK back in the days. I think they're fine for producing. For mixing, my mixes done on them sound terrible now. So, but it may be my skill as well. Well, definitely was my skill as well.
Sorry, Alan, I muted you because you've got some background noise.
That's a washing machine, yes, in this holiday account. Sorry about that. I'll go back on mute.
No, it's fine. I mean, no. Sorry. If you had it. Again, I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, and I think we came to the conclusion that KRKs are a little bit over-flattering in the low end because maybe they're more suited for sort of monitoring like in the creative context, or they're just really good for DJs who want to DJ at home and have like a boomy experience. But like I think that like maybe not so good for mixing, but very good in like the creative process where you kind of need a little bit of that low end just to give you the sort of satisfaction that you're heading in the right direction, but maybe not good for mixing.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. I think I'm similar to Gus. I tend to use the headphones more now. Ironically, that the cheapest monitors I ever had, some really old M Audio, like absolute rubbish, but I have them on top of each other, and they actually sound really flat, and I actually quite like the sound of them. Maybe it just says something about my ears more than the speakers, but it's nice to have a flick between them because they sound radically different.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what your budget is. Like,
There's go for it.
No, you go.
I was just going to mention that, like in combination with the speakers and headphones talk, there's I can't remember his name, but there is a couple mastering engineers that actually master on headphones, but they use, it's like a earbud similar to this, but they're actually molded to your ear. And that's another consideration that I hear a lot of engineers talk about, especially if I feel like I keep saying this over and over again, but I just hear it so much that the speakers just don't matter if your room isn't tuned, because you're going to buy these really nice speakers or these really cheap speakers. But if your room isn't tuned, you're still not going to be getting, the correct translation of what your sound actually is. So that was just I can't remember what the name of them it is. So this is kind of a pointless thing that I brought up, but they're actually like plugs rather than cans that you can get.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be. I mean, I'm worried enough about my hearing as it is because I've just spent so many years just blasting things into my ears.
Have you checked your hearing?
No.
Oh, okay. Because it's fun on its own, because they kind of measure, they give you an array of signals and they measure what you hear through the bone, like directly, which like is sort of, they have this contact microphone which connects directly to the skull, not through the skin. It's just applied to with pressure on the skull, and it's sort of, it vibrates and it translates the signal directly into your hearing nerves. And then they give you the same range of signals that you hear coming through your ear canal. And they kind of measure the difference, like when do you still hear them or you not hear them. And they kind of measure, by this difference, they measure how much of a hearing loss you have. Which is like a fun thing to do as well. Just as
there's a natural sort of decay in sort of upper hearing. When I've suffered with tinnitus for almost 15 years as a result of very loud sounds of my own self-inflicted, lots of loud headphones and playing in loud bands in my sort of early 20s. So that's interesting. I'm lucky it's quite at the higher end of things, so you kind of learn to ignore it. So I don't know what that sounds like to someone who doesn't have the same problem. So there's probably bits in my sound that I just don't hear, or I hear differently, but I guess everybody's got some difference.
You have to consider this all the time. Like Gus said, I think we discussed this on the first Compress It Like an Idiot. It doesn't really matter what the response of your speakers is. You have to learn how they sound, and you have to kind of just go make your decision based on your assumptions, rather than assume you have incorrect frequency response from speakers. And I tend to think that frequency response doesn't even matter, to be frank. I feel what's more important is a phase coherence between the speakers, to make sure all your frequencies are produced at the same kind of time. And because otherwise some phasing problems may occur. You just hear things differently. You can hear a lot of problems if your phase is just incorrect. And it doesn't even really matter on a budget, to be frank. I think the best advice I got from Gearspace forums is that if you can't mix on a $3,000-$5,000 speakers, then it's not the speakers, mate. It's you. So essentially whatever speakers you get, if you learn the trade, if you learn to mix, you should be good on any, because like if you learn them, you can produce them. But that I have a like room renovations in this room I have, because I pulled all the panels down, and then I'm waiting for a like acoustic curtains come in. Like I have a ton of job to do, because I had like some issues I had to address. But again, I hate working on headphones just because it's not how you hear the sound. Like even though you can hear frequencies sort of correct, or rather like more closer to the source, it's not how in a lot of cases the sound is heard, because all the headphones will be different, and it almost doesn't matter, to be frank, which speakers you've got. I have Amphions standing in a back room. They cost like 7,000 euros, and they sound like dog shit in this room. It's just like I can make decisions in sort of mid-range and higher range, but in like anything below 500 hertz, it's complete mess. Like I can't hear anything from them. So it's not even a question of price. Like whatever you invest in the speakers, you have to invest in your room for sure. And some rooms just sound bad, and you have to find a good place for your speakers to kind of go a little bit higher, a little bit lower, a little bit to the sides, and it changes a lot. It changes frequency response drastically, and you have to kind of build a room from scratch to be able to widen the sweet spot you have when you're sitting at your desk. Your ears are right here in this kind of space, and that's the best thing you can do, is to kind of make sure in this particular space you're hearing all the right things from your speakers. But the more expensive studio is, the wider the sweet spot is, right? You can like move a little bit to the left, to the right, and it still sounds good, still sounds true. And you can sit down clients back in sort of on a sofa, and it still sounds good. So that's what I'm personally trying to do with the room. But that I'm not sure the speakers are the problems, to be frank.
There's an
audio is such a bottomless pit.
That's true.
There's an interesting question in the chat, which I'm sure all of us can have an opinion on. It's by, is it Jun Yang? What are your go-to techniques whenever you have a bad case of writer's or producer's block? I think I'm sure all of us have an opinion on that.
Yeah, just go to sleep.
I would say,
Very good question.
like, I just need to do something, and for me often works if I just come up with, just make some restrictions up and just do. So let's say I take Ableton and I'm just going to use the operator to make all the sounds with it, or like it could be almost anything, because in that process I would inevitably do something that I wouldn't have thought about or had planned for, and all of a sudden that opens another door that then leads to something else. And I think it's more, I just need something quite small and specific just to start doing something, because yeah, just sitting there not doing anything is not working for me.
We actually did a whole podcast on this, right? Recently, what was it called, Duncan? The
finishing tracks.
Yeah, that was it. Very well named for this, but there was a lot of opinions on there. If you're,
I guess this is more like this is more like a starting tracks question, I suppose, isn't it? Rather than a finishing. I mean, I've got like, well, for starters, you can go and watch my YouTube channel, because 90% of it is creator's block, dealing with creator's block stuff. Like, I guess it kind of really depends what your motivations are. And if your motivations are that every time you sit down, you need to write a piece of music, but when you're sitting down to write a piece of music and you can't, then that's the perfect time to just fuck about and just not think about making music and just try everything. Just like pull something in and go, I don't know what this is. I'm just going to screw around with it until I vaguely understand what it does. And then maybe it might set you off, and then you might be like, well, hang on a minute, I've got something here. And then that can turn into something else. So if your sort of regular routine is that you sit down and you sit down to write music and you can't, like, you don't always have to do music when you do music. You can just like screw around and explore stuff. And, you know, you might just screw around and explore stuff and nothing will happen. But it all goes into your brain. It all kind of gets stored in there in some way so that the next time that you are in the zone where you're creating stuff, you can act upon your instincts a lot faster because of all that kind of creative play that you had when you weren't focused on making music. So, yeah, or you could just go to sleep, as Nick says. You could just not do it. Just do nothing and don't feel bad. Don't feel bad that you haven't made music because it's quite difficult sometimes. So,
And
yeah.
I just to jump off of what Duncan was just saying, even if it's not like crazy creative, like, you know, the sort of things you see in his videos, even if it's just something like watch a few tutorials on how a compressor works or EQ techniques or something like that. Then you take a drum loop and you try to compress it or whatever, and something interesting might happen in that process. So it's essentially exactly what Duncan is saying, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, with the crazy sort of change that he'll come up with, or, you know, taking one piece of, you know, whether it be a drum machine or an oscillator or something and trying to turn it into a huge whatever. It can just be a simple thing like a compressor. A lot of times that'll send you down a path of something. And the other thing I was just going to mention was when you are doing these experiments, even if you hate it, chances are you have the hard drive space. Just record it and save it and put it in a file somewhere and completely forget about it, because you'll find it later and use it for something when you find yourself in a similar spot like this.
Yeah, definitely record all your experiments.
Also, this is a good time to, like, you know, organize your samples, you know, build racks, build, you know, stuff that you can pull into your session at a later point in time. Like if you're not feeling creative, there's lots of ways to still remain productive. And often, you know, some of those organizational, you know, sessions lead to creative sessions because, you know, you hear a sample that you didn't know you had in your sample library and it's like, oh, hey, that sparks an idea. So
Yeah, it's kind of like when you clean your flat or your
Yeah.
house and you go, oh fuck, I forgot I had this. This is cool. I love this thing. And then you get all excited and then something happens. But yeah, like, you know, you can definitely do good housekeeping, administrative tasks, organize yourself. It's always good for your mental health as well to keep things organized and, you know, yeah.
I think what you said at first about what you want to achieve might be key to it. I mean, I was almost going to ask a question earlier about why even bother finishing a track? Because, for example, this week, I mean, you know, I have a different job, so I don't have to earn money via music. But I started something based on that latest video with the MIDI melody generation. And I've had a fantastic time this week, just sampling the MIDI and then resampling, then fiddling with it more. And I've been just letting it play for like half an hour because I've been really enjoying it. And I think that in itself is an inherent benefit of making music. I don't, at that point, I don't care whether it's ever finished, whatever finished means. I'm just enjoying the process. And I think if you can let go of that, this has to be leading somewhere. It's effectively restating what you said, just experimenting, but not worrying that it has to be part of a finished thing. It's just inherently a pleasurable thing to do. And then maybe that'll lead you to more productivity.
That's an excellent point I wanted to mention later on. Is I go through many phases like this, and I think, Adam, you mentioning about the idea of your goals is important. And actually a technique, the guy who's not on today, Alex, Human Synthetics, he actually put me onto this, which is taking any sound, just take a sample, anything, and almost pick one randomly and try and do something with it. And don't really care about the end result. Just take a small sample and do something with it. And you're not writing your next tune, but often that at least breaks the creative sort of drought, and you'll definitely get something that you weren't expecting. But this idea of spending ages trying the perfect sounds, just takes anything and play with it.
Well, and also like what Adam was saying, as far as just doing it for the sake of doing it, I feel like it's a weird thing for us because we have the equipment to always be recording or, finishing a track. Like we have it all right there. We can do it easily. So we feel like we should. But lots of people just play the acoustic guitar or the piano or the organ or harmonica or whatever. And they literally don't have the stuff to record it. They just do it because it's fun to do it. I think that's such a great point and observation, that just do it to do it. Don't try and finish something.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if it's not finished. You don't have to finish things. They can just exist. They can just decorate your time and give you a bit of joy. And I'm going to make a sport analogy. I'm not sporty at all, but there are two types of sports people. There are those who want to win, and there are those who just want to play the sport. Just for fun.
Yep.
It's leisure. So, again, it's kind of what your concerns are. Mine's sort of 50-50. Maybe 60-40, 40% like I must finish things, 60% like, I've got all this stuff, I'm just going to mess around because, I've got it. I might as well do it. So everyone's different, but I think my point is, like, you don't have to make music when you sit down to do music. You can just kind of do it, I suppose. Yeah. Anyone else want to add to that?
I think we should mention the most recent comment. I appreciate it.
I can't see it because I haven't got my glasses on.
Go for it, Gus.
This isn't the face my brain has created for Ned's voice. I'm unsubscribing. I agree.
This isn't the face my brain has created for Ned's voice. I'm subscribing. Oh, shit. I don't have the right face for YouTube.
He's just disappointed you have face.
10 years I've been hiding my face, and then I reveal it, and now I'm losing subscribers.
Duncan, you
He'll
can
be
try out
more
this thing called
disappointed.
face dance. I found it the other day, and I've been doing it. Like, it's this thing that does this deep fakes on you. It's like you can do a few for free. Try it out, and it maps like. So maybe that's the cure here. You could just deep fake yourself.
Maybe we should ask, what's his name? Aphex Twix. What face did you imagine?
Which one of us?
Like, yeah.
Let's see how long he takes to respond. So
I would just say, Duncan, when I first saw, after watching your videos for so long, when I saw you for the first time, I was like, yeah, that's him. I think it fits perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Does
had
that make
no
you feel awkward or
expectations as
better?
well.
I think one person left a comment saying that they were really disappointed that I wasn't fat and had long hair. I think it's because I put too much bass on the mic. So what? Tell me about this deepfake app again. Does it have Alec Guinness?
It has. It's called Face Dance. It's an iPhone app,
Oh my
and
God.
it kind of has a lot of famous video clips from films and things, and it maps your face over those. There was some things.
Oh, I
from-
think I might have seen it. Yeah.
It's deeply intriguing, actually. It's not a way of sharing someone here, but it's kind of terrifying at the same time. You're like, how sophisticated this is for a toy, really, and cloud processing that sits behind it. You can imagine what that would be like in 5 years from now. But have a play with it, because you can get some interesting results.
Did you see that video I put on the Discord today of of Steven Spielberg telling Harrison Ford that he's not directing the new Indiana Jones movie, but it's a deep fake? I put it in the banter on Discord. You got to watch it. It's very, very, very funny. Well, unless there's any more questions, maybe this might be a good time to wrap up. We're hitting 11 o'clock here in the UK. What do you guys think? This has been pretty good. I think we've covered a lot of juicy ground. Anyone else in the chat? Who's just coming back now? Oh, it's John. Okay, well, this was... All right, we'll wrap it up then. This was Compress It Like an Idiot, the Patreon group live stream Q&A hangout. Thanks, everyone, for taking part. Thanks, everyone in the chat. And we will do it again soon. Everyone say goodbye. Anyone want to just like promote themselves before we get going? Anyone want to do any shameless self-promotion? You have
Maybe
my
everyone
permission.
should just take note of our chat names, and then if they're curious, they should look it up. Maybe a last round of like, if you could be given a piece of gear, what would it be?
If I could be given one,
yeah, would it be?
I'd like a really. I think I'd like a Eventide DSP 4000. I'd like an old Eventide like rack mount unit. That's what I'd like.
Overstay or modular channel.
Anyone else?
CS80 Yamaha.
Yeah, because you just want to play jump on it. That's what you want to do.
I think that was an Oberheim, but I think the it's more like Vangelis stuff, isn't it? Like Braid Runner. But they're like 40 grand or something ridiculous.
Wasn't jump on the CS80?
I believe that was an Oberheim synth. Well, we've got another hour now arguing over this, haven't we?
Yeah, let's just wrap up. No more comments. People are not allowed to.
We'll settle it once the stream's over. Anyone else? Nick, if you were going to be gifted a piece of equipment, what would you?
I have to say an Eve console.
Yeah. Good one. John?
Oh, gee, I don't know. Something expensive, probably a Neve channel strip, you know.
More obstacle courses for your cats.
Yeah, there you go.
Adam?
Yeah, get to work, guys.
SH101. I know there are at least 3 represented on this group.
Well, Phillips is probably in shot.
Yes, right
Yeah,
at the back.
I'll just quickly point at mine. There it is. There we go.
I thought we had 2.
Yes, the
No,
other
Phillips got 2, yeah.
Yeah, the other one is not. I mean, oh gosh, I don't know what happened now. My camera died. The other one is not technically mine. I'm just babysitting it, and I've been babysitting it for like 7 years or something.
I think that means it's yours.
Yeah, sort of.
It turns out that me and Philip both own SH101s and the same shirt from Primark.
Mm. Can we start a band based on those?
Should we do an SH101 band wearing these shirts?
Yeah, I don't know.
Only if you use the special grip thing.
Yeah.
Get the guitar grip.
And do the 2 of us have to like make chords using the 3 of them?
Yeah, we'll do like 2-note harmonies.
Close harmonies on SH101 wearing Fox shirts.
Yeah, we'll do like some like Welsh folk singing renditions on SH101.
Yeah, and can
close harmony singing.
What's that dancing when you skip around? What's it called? Morris dancing. Can we do that?
in everything and wearing Primark shirts. This is just writing itself, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, time to wrap up.
Yeah, time to wrap up. Okay, thanks everyone. See you next time. This was Compress It Like an Idiot. Bye.
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 And now. All right.
Oh,
Interesting stuff.